Okay, I think I figured out what Bikini Bottom actually is. And no, it's not the nuclear theory. It's not anything you've heard before. This whole thing started because I was just rewatching Feral Friends, seeing all of them devolved in their real forms and behaving erratically. It's just funny. And naturally, you can't help but think, what does this moon even do? Why is it even called Neptune in the first place? So I started digging to find out, and the deeper I got, the stranger it became, because the more I pulled on that one little thread, the more the entire show started unraveling in my hands. Things I'd watched 100 times suddenly stopped making sense. Things I'd never questioned started looking suspicious. By the time I went outside for air, I wasn't answering my original question anymore. And for better or worse, I think I might have accidentally made my own SpongeBob evolution theory. What made me actually start questioning this whole thing is that the fact there are two kinds of life in Bikini Bottom. There's the normal citizens, SpongeBob, Squidward, and basically every talking, walking, working fish in the background, or what we normally call the incidentals. And then there's everything else. Gary the snail, the worms, the jellyfish in jellyfish fields, the scallops, the clams. These animals don't talk in the same language. They meow, they chitter, or they sting. Most of the time they get kept as pets like Gary, or get hunted for sport like the jellyfish. Not to mention, there are episodes where some of these animals got milked dry, like Jellyfish Hunter. I guess most of us watching SpongeBob always notice these things, but we rarely asked why or how these things exist in the first place. We often brush it off as, it is what it is. I mean, there are way more interesting things to think about when you watch episodes like SB-129, right? So it felt pretty normal, even though the show is openly telling you that two completely different tiers of life exist in the same city, and that one tier owns the other. So the big question is, why? Why does this caste system exist in the first place? The most popular answer floating around the internet right now is, of course, without a doubt, the nuclear theory. The whole fact about Bikini Bottom is named after Bikini Atoll. The United States tested nuclear weapons there in the 1940s and 50s. The radiation mutated the sea life. Boom! Talking sponge. It got so notorious that even Mr. Lawrence, who voices Plankton and writes for the show, confirmed in an Esquire interview that Bikini Bottom is the result of nuclear testing at Bikini Atoll. Case closed, right? Not even close. Because the biggest caveat with this theory is that there is a prehistoric SpongeBob. In the episode, there's a primitive version of SpongeBob and Patrick and Squidward, which are Spongegar, Patar, Squog, living in some caveman-era Bikini Bottom. And in SB-129, when Squidward time travels backward, he meets another primitive sponge, ones that presumably are even older than Spongegar, sitting in a Cambrian-era seafloor surrounded by trilobites and ammonites. Then there's dunces and dragons, where we see a medieval Bikini Bottom. Knights, a castle, court intrigue, a king. The show clearly shows us that this civilization is old, hundreds of millions of years old. If you take SB-129 literally, definitely older than 1946, where all the nuclear thingies started happening. So the nuclear theory doesn't answer the question, and at most, they were one event in a much, much longer story. But what that means for us is that this evolution in Bikini Bottom isn't a one-time accident. It's been happening for a very long time, and maybe, just maybe, somebody has been doing it on purpose. Now, just in case you forgot, even though it's very unlikely, there's a god in this universe. Every time someone is shocked, the words out of their mouth are, "Dear Neptune."
Oh, my Neptune. Neptune. Great Neptune in heaven.
Oh, Neptune.
Neptune preserver. Neptune's name is going on.
Not Jesus, Neptune, the ruler of the seven seas. Most of the people in Bikini Bottom swear by him. They invoke him. They build statues to him, which is why I don't think it's a stretch to call him a real deity in this universe, walking around with established lore and a recognized royal lineage. Now, here's where it gets interesting. In Feral Friends, when the de-evolution event happens, the French narrator, Frenchie, calls the shining moon with a specific name.
I have been monitoring the behavior of the green moon all day. It is called Neptune's moon.
Neptune's moon, a cosmic mechanism that evolves and de-evolves sea life on a fixed cycle, named after the only god in the show, as if suggesting who's really behind the whole charade. But the thing is, the citizens of Bikini Bottom don't know it's called Neptune's moon. They have no idea what it is. They just stare up at it slack-jawed, like it's an alien. They don't know that the thing is literally named after their god. They don't even guess that maybe this mechanism that's been shaping their species for hundreds of millions of years ties to their ruler. We'll get to why that matters later. For now, just hold on to that. My point for now is that if Neptune controls a moon that de-evolves people, it's not crazy to think he could pull off the opposite too. An evolving sun, maybe. Some other mechanism we never see. After all, magic to bend reality or to change someone to another form is not a rare concept for him. We saw him do that in Neptune Spatula, and even the first movie. Now, let's just say Neptune did it. Neptune evolved a few creatures in the sea to become a better species than the rest. The most obvious question following that statement is, of course, why? And honestly, it's not hard to guess. For one, gods need worshippers. But Neptune is a god of the seas. Meanwhile, sea sponges don't worship. Worms don't worship. Jellyfish definitely don't worship. If you're a god and you want a kingdom that actually recognizes you as a king, you need minds down there, smart enough to be capable of saying your name and be faithful. So Neptune picked some species, evolved them, gave them speech in society, and boom, instant congregation. And the most interesting part in this is that the evolved-unevolved divide has a very specific design, because only some species got promoted into citizenship. Meanwhile, the rest stayed as raw material, as pets, food, or even hobbies. And I'm going to go as far as saying there's actually a logic to who he picked. This is where it gets a bit science-y, so stay with me. In real-world ecology, there's a concept called R/K selection theory. It's a way of classifying species by their reproduction strategy. R-selected species reproduce fast, could easily have tons of offspring, invest very little in each one, and have short lives, such as jellyfish, plankton, worms, and sea slugs. You could say that they're built for quantity. On the other hand, K-selected species are the opposite. They mature slowly, reproduce less, invest heavily in each offspring, and live longer. Think whales, octopuses, large fish, and crabs. They're built for quality. Pearl is a sperm whale. Textbook K, the largest brain of any animal on Earth, by the way, which is why Hillenburg gave her that oversized head. SpongeBob, Patrick, Squidward, Mr. Krabs, Mrs. Puff, Larry, all K-leaning. Slow maturing, long-lived, low reproduction. And the ones that didn't get evolved? Jellyfish, the biology textbook example of an R strategist. Worms, snails, scallops, plankton. The pattern isn't perfect, but it's there. And there's a really obvious reason why. If you give intelligence to a species that reproduces in thousands per generation, that species could easily take over. You give consciousness to jellyfish, and inside of 2 centuries, jellyfish are the dominant life form on Earth. Same with worms. Same with plankton. You'd lose control of your own civilization within a few hundred years. But sponges, whales, crabs, you can manage those. Their populations grow slowly. They invest in their offspring. They self-regulate. They're governable. I think it's not a crazy thing to say that someone like Neptune would pick the ones he could keep on a leash. Now, I know what you're thinking. What about Plankton? You just named who's arguably one of the smartest people in Bikini Bottom as our strategist. But he's evolved. He built his own robot wife. He has a PhD level intellect. And while this could be a problem for this theory, the show actually answers this for us. In the season 3 episode, Plankton's Army, Sheldon calls in his entire extended family for backup. And what shows up is a horde of hillbilly plankton, banjos, overalls. His cousin Clem literally cannot read. They show up expecting evil genius work, and they're stunned that that's what Sheldon does. Sheldon takes one look at his own family and says, quote, "I've been away from home longer than I thought."
It's Cousin Plankton!
I've been away from home longer than I thought.
Sheldon Plankton isn't a counterexample to the theory. Actually, when you think about it, he's the exception that proves it even more. His entire species is an unevolved baseline. Hillbillies, illiterate, simple-minded. Meanwhile, Sheldon is the one fluke, the one copepod in a million who slipped through. He went to school, he invented Karen, and definitely got out of the trailer park and became an evil genius. But ain't that a problem for Neptune? Well, yes and no. Plankton is the size of a fingernail. Every plan he has fails. Every scheme collapses. He gets stepped on, swatted, eaten by accident, blown up, except the rare one time with his Plan Z in the first movie. But that's also kind of an exception. So you could say Neptune lets him off the hook. Barely, as long as he stays small and frustrated. Okay, so Neptune evolved his preferred species. He has a worshipping civilization. He runs maintenance on it through the 100-year Neptune's moon cycle. But here's where the theory shifts from interesting to what the hell? Because this whole framework, evolved citizens, unevolved animals, divine selection, that's only the setup. It's not what this video is mainly about. What this theory is actually about is what it means for the rest of the show. Or, to be precise, what Bikini Bottom actually is as a society. Because if you sit with this premise for a minute, that Bikini Bottom is a civilization of selectively evolved sea life that went through their own evolutionary journey, just like us, then I guarantee you, the show will quickly become something we painfully recognize. Watch what happens. These citizens went through a primitive era. We saw it. Then they went through a medieval era. We saw that too. There's even a cowboy era, the Old West version of Bikini Bottom in Pest of the West. Industrial, modern, they've gone through every stage of civilization that we did, the exact same arc. This isn't a coincidence. The show tells you that this civilization is parallel to ours. They became smart the way we did. And if you know anything about we as a human species, there's always a dark part within our history. When humans became the smart species on land, what did we do? We looked at every other animal and decided what they were for. Cows are for milking and eating. Horses are for riding. Dogs are for companionship. Pigs are for food. Birds are for hunting. We invented a moral category called animal that meant less than us, available for use. And so, for the better or worse, Bikini Bottom did the exact same thing. Let me show you what I mean. Jellyfish in Bikini Bottom are livestock. In Jellyfish Hunter, Season 2, Mr. Krabs sets up a jellyfish jelly factory. SpongeBob brings him jellyfish, and Mr. Krabs milks them by putting them into a machine and drains them dry.
What is this horrible place?
But it gets better. In the episode Farmer Bob, there's a jellyfish named Old Bessie, a name that is specifically a cow name in the American agricultural tradition. And Old Bessie is owned by a farmer. And jellyfish jelly is sold as food. It's an ingredient, maybe even categorized as a dairy product for all we know. Now, look at seahorses. In My Pretty Seahorse, Season 3, SpongeBob finds a wild seahorse and names her Mystery. he rides her. He ties her up at a post outside the Krusty Krab, and the show specifically frames this with Old West imagery, the way you'd hitch a horse outside a saloon. She's a wild animal that can be domesticated. And even though the episode makes SpongeBob look weird doing it, he's not the only one. In the SpongeBob movie, King Neptune's royal chariot is pulled by seahorses, the exact same parallel humans built with horses and royal carriages. Royalty rides domesticated mounts. You see, seahorses are horses, jellyfish are cattle, and we could stretch this as far as Bikini Bottom goes. Scallops are birds, snails are cats, Gary definitely meows, just like worms get treated as dogs. The civilization in Bikini Bottom has recreated our entire livestock and pet ecosystem, with the same moral category of, this is an animal, it's mine, I get to do what I want with it. It's the same exact pattern. Another thing that makes me convinced with this evolution thingy is that if you rewatched Feral Friends again, every single fish that de-evolved got significantly bigger than their own true size. The fish became twice its size, and even Squidward and Pearl got way bigger than Sandy's tree dome. We humans went through the same thing. It's a sign of a civilization that has become too convenient with technology. We lost our muscle, our raw powers, because we have machines that do the jobs for us. These fish don't even seem to be able to swim far away anymore, since they've got legs now and could ride a boat to travel far. But this realization, as crazy as it sounds, it's just the beginning. Now we get to the question that has haunted every SpongeBob fan for 26 years. What is chum? Chum is the food sold at the Chum Bucket, Plankton's failed competitor restaurant across from the Krusty Krab. The show makes a running joke out of it. Chum is disgusting. Chum is awful. Plankton barely has any customers because chum is gross. But in our world, chum is bait. It's ground up fish parts, guts, heads, scraps that fishermen throw in the water to attract sharks. Real chum, by definition, is fish meat. So for years, fans have been asking if chum is made of fish and Bikini Bottom is full of fish people, then isn't chum practically cannibalism? Isn't Plankton selling ground-up citizens? And yet, the people in Bikini Bottom never accused Plankton as being a cannibal, or that the Chum Bucket is a shady place that encourages cannibalism. Because if that's the case, Plankton has way more important matters to deal with rather than to steal the Krabby Patty recipe. Not to mention, Plankton is not the only one selling chum in this city. Isn't that strange? And true to their fashion, the show never officially answers this. Not once. But the show's writers kinda give us a clue. Mr. Lawrence, who voices Plankton and writes for SpongeBob, said something on the record that you need to hear. He explained that the writers are not allowed to depict fish as food in this show. And not just the Krabby Patty, no fish meat, anywhere. And then he said this: there is no meat served in Bikini Bottom except at the Chum Bucket. You hear that? There's no meat served in Bikini Bottom except at the Chum Bucket. Now, I want you to think about everything we've just laid out. We humans, when we eat meat, we eat the animals we don't consider people or pets. Cows, pigs, chicken, fish. We don't eat dogs or cats, generally, at least. Bikini Bottom drew the exact same line, where the citizens on one side and unevolved sea life, jellyfish, worms, snails, primitive fish, plankton, on the other. Eating chum isn't cannibalism, since chum is considered a meat from the unevolved side of the line. This is also where I have to make it clear when I say unevolved side of the line, it doesn't always have to be primitive fish like the ones we saw in Feral Friends. It's just something that people of Bikini Bottom considered as fish in their own terms. It could be clam's meat, or, I don't know, a sea bear maybe? And even in the worst case, if they actually eat a regular sea fish, it would be an equivalent to us humans, eating monkeys, a lesser, less evolved version of humans. Now, the reason the writers can't show what's in chum is probably that the show can't depict citizens eating each other. That would be horrifying for kids. But they also can't depict citizens eating primitive fish, because primitive fish look enough like citizens that it would also be horrifying. So they hide it. They keep chum ambiguous. They keep the Krabby Patty vegetarian, in the official interview at least. But us, the audience, fills in the gap on their own. Most fans assume the worst: cannibalism. But the truth is, the one that fits everything else the show has built is that chum is just meat. The same way a hamburger is just meat to us. The same way milk is just milk to us. That's why nobody's shutting down the chum bucket. That's why fishing clams is a normal hobby. That's why nobody's having a moral crisis about the Krusty Krab. The show has been telling you this for 26 years. You just didn't notice because it was wrapped in jokes. But other than everyday stuff like that, this theory makes some episodes feel really different. One of which is the feral friends that we talked about earlier. I mean, if the fish are evolved by Neptune, and every 100 years, Neptune's moon comes by to strip them down to nothing, there's a high chance this event isn't just a natural occurrence. It could be Neptune doing it on purpose, to specifically remind them of what they were before. Reminds them whose ocean they live in. So, in theory, this could very well be a religious event. A big faith day, where every century the god of the sea touches his creation and reasserts his presence. The citizens were supposed to look up, see the moon, and remember their place. But they don't. If you go back and watch Feral Friends, when Neptune's moon appears, the citizens of Bikini Bottom don't know what it is. They gawk at it like it's a novelty. They've forgotten. The only one who names it correctly is Frenchie. So the ritual is still running on schedule. The cycle is still going. But the meaning has been lost. And honestly, this happens to gods all the time, in our world too. The god gets old, worship gets vestigial, prayers become exclamations. People say, "Oh my God," without meaning it. They say Jesus Christ as a swear. They invoke deities they no longer believe in. In Bikini Bottom, they say, "Dear Neptune," the same way. They don't mean it. The worship has decayed into vocabulary. And to make matters worse, a squirrel comes down from the surface. Sandy Cheeks does not belong here. She's a squirrel, from Texas no less. She has nothing related to anything maritime. And yet, she lives in a glass dome full of land air in the middle of the ocean. Sandy is, by every metric, an evolved land creature. A talking, thinking mammal from above the water. Which would be fine, except that's Neptune's domain she's living in. Mostly. Here's the wild thing. In pressure, not all land creatures are like Sandy. There are seagulls in that episode. They are not smart. They behave like real seagulls. Squawking, dive bombing, and mindless. So the surface has its own evolved, unevolved divide too. Sandy is on the evolved side. The seagulls aren't, which means something is doing on land what Neptune did in the sea. Some force, some other god, some mechanism, selecting species, evolving them, leaving others as background animals. Neptune isn't the only one playing this game, and here's why this matters for Neptune specifically. In Feral Friends, the one who saves everyone is an outsider, the one who wasn't supposed to be in this domain in the first place. Think about that. If Neptune is paying attention to his ocean, this is the worst possible outcome. He's a god who's slowly losing his civilization. So let me put it all together. Bikini Bottom is not a quirky cartoon town. It is a complete civilization with the same evolutionary history as ours. drifting away from the god that created it, in a domain shared with at least one other power he doesn't control. Every weird thing about the show makes sense once you see this, and the writers, bless them, have built all of this without ever telling you they did, because the rules, they say, can't. They can't show fish as food. They can't reveal Pearl's mother. They can't tell you what's in Chum. The team had a hard limit on what this show was allowed to reveal. And so, the deeper civilization stayed buried, hidden in side mentions and one-off jokes, and Frenchie's narration. But it's all there, every piece of it. There's one more thing I want to leave you with, since I think they knew what they were doing. When Hillenburg designed Pearl, he gave her an oversized head because sperm whales have the largest brains of any animal on Earth, and he thought it was funny. When he made Squidward an octopus, it was because octopuses have bulbous heads and look pompous. When he made SpongeBob a sponge, it was because real sponges can't really swim or fight or do anything dramatic, and he wanted a protagonist who was small in a big world. Every species choice in this show was made by a man who understood marine biology in his bones. And whether he meant to or not, whether the lore here was deliberate or just the unavoidable result of a marine biologist building a world from his own knowledge, what he ended up making was a real civilization, parallel to ours, governed by real ecology, with its own gods, its own history, and its own dark moral choices, smuggled into a show about a yellow sponge for kids. Welcome to Bikini Bottom. It was never just a show.
Why does Sandy Cheeks choose to live in Bikini Bottom? This question has existed since the beginning of SpongeBob SquarePants because why? Why would a land mammal from Texas willingly move to the bottom of the ocean? Is she down here for legitimate research? Or is she on some kind of secret mission? Or is the internet right and Sandy has been spying on Bikini Bottom the entire time? But there's one thing that's been bothering me for quite a while. The spy theory always sounded cool, but nobody ever explains the actual job. Like, spying on what? For what reason? So I said to myself, fine, let's solve this theory for good. I'm gonna trace Sandy's role from the ground up. Like, see what she does, what she builds, what she's involved in, and see for myself if Sandy Cheeks' spy theory survives the evidence. And what surprises me is that the answer is not something I'd ever expect. Now, before we go any further, if you've ever fallen down the SpongeBob theory rabbit hole, you've probably heard Alex Bale's Bikini Bottom television theory. The idea that SpongeBob is basically an underwater documentary, and Sandy's spy theory is part of what makes that conspiracy feel plausible. He said that Sandy might be working for the French narrator and carrying out some hidden agenda to help him. And while it's interesting, I found that Sandy's job desk as a spy is underexplained, to say the least. So no, I'm not here to re-explain the entire television theory. My scope is simpler and way more annoying. I just want to know what we know about Sandy's role underwater, and what's the most realistic explanation for her having a direct line to the Frenchie narrator. That's it, that's our goal. With that being said, to get there, we can't start with Frenchie right away. We start with the boring foundation. What do we actually know about Sandy Cheeks? In the first 3 seasons alone, the show never explains much about Sandy's background. It just presents her as a fact of life. She's a squirrel living in a tree dome, she's absurdly smart, and she builds cutting-edge tech as some sort of hobby, including a spaceship.
I've been to the moon. There are no aliens.
Then in the episode Texas, we get an explanation of how she originated from Texas and has lived the life of a cowboy since a young age.
I'll always be a Texas girl. I wanna go home.
But there's still no explanation as to how or why she left Texas in the first place, or what made her move to Bikini Bottom. And that unanswered why becomes way harder to ignore once we hit season 4. In Chimps Ahoy, Sandy is in distress because she said her bosses, the chimps, are coming to inspect her work.
They're coming! The chimps are coming!
Oh?
My bosses! They're coming for an inspection!
And if she can't impress them with an invention, she'll be forced to leave Bikini Bottom. Now, aside from how the plot turns into a bunch of nut machines and a banana peeling robot, there are a few details in that episode that matter way more than the nut jokes. For one, all the chimps are named Professor Percy, Dr. Marmalade, and Lord Reginald. And they all sound British.
Lord Reginald, are you all right?
I seem to have ruptured my pomposity.
They're all board directors from a surface company called Tree Dome Enterprises Limited. And according to them, this company is the one funding Sandy's tree dome and research. Which immediately raises the question, why would a company from Britain be funding a Texan scientist to do research at the bottom of the ocean, especially when none of the inventions Sandy's tried have anything to do with underwater life?
Frankly, I'm beginning to question the economic benefits of underwater tree domes.
They even say they've been searching for a banana peeler for 117 years. Respectfully, you don't need to sponsor an underwater dome to solve that. You could definitely do that topside. So that gives us two possibilities. Either Tree Dome Enterprises has a hidden reason why they want Sandy underwater, or they didn't choose Bikini Bottom, Sandy did. It could just be that Sandy is the best mammal scientist on land, so the company is just paying for her to work wherever she decides to set up, which means Tree Dome Enterprises has nothing to do with Sandy's decision to work underwater. Then we're back to the same confusing question. Why did she pick the ocean in the first place? Now, earlier I said Sandy's inventions rarely have anything to do with underwater life, and the show kind of proves that over and over. Most of the time, Sandy's inventions are purely science-breaking machines. She made a teleporter in Squid Bob Tentacle Pants with its separator ray gun to fix the morphing problem, a shrink ray and cutting-edge submarine in Squid-tastic Voyage. There's also other stuff like rocket ships, the time capsules from PL 1413, and the vortex machines that we see in Doodle Bob Dimension. If anything, Sandy's almost never made a gadget that's used in espionage missions. Well, almost. In Season 5, Spy Buddies, SpongeBob and Patrick get a mission from Mr. Krabs to spy on Plankton and reveal his next big plan to steal the patty recipe before he can carry it out. And since neither of them have any suitable gadgets to spy on Plankton, they immediately go to Sandy for help.
Well, I know you need a lot of crazy gadgets, like jetpack, laser-equipped Bermuda shorts with walkie-talkies, cameras that fit up your nose, and my favorite, the knockout ray.
Which means our squirrel friends do know how to make a spy gadget. Well, I guess it's not surprising. When you can make reality-bending technologies on a daily basis, it's really not that hard to make something like a mini camera and walkie-talkie pants. Still, inventing espionage tools doesn't necessarily mean they're spies, right? I mean, Oppenheimer didn't go to the front line and drop the nuclear bomb himself. But does Sandy have a reason to keep spy-grade tools on standby? Because if she does, then someone else is actually using the gadget, right? One big probability is Plankton and Karen. It just makes sense for Plankton to use these kinds of things. He had this big mission to steal the Krabby Patty recipe from the Krusty Krab. Also, it's not really weird for fellow scientists to hang out together. We saw Sandy and Plankton play some chess in Mimic Madness, and build her teleporter machine with Plankton's help in perfect chemistry. And even though it's rare, we get to see Sandy and Karen team up to solve a problem, like in Salsa Imbecilis. It's not an exaggeration to think that maybe Sandy had something to do with Karen's development. Maybe she did help Plankton turn a CCTV into the supercomputer that Karen is today. I mean, the possibilities are there. So take that into account. It's not hard to see them working together on an espionage mission. However, even if that is true, I'm sure Sandy's only involvement was to help them make the gadget. Because if she did help them with a plan to steal the Krabby Patty, then the recipe would have fallen into Plankton's hands a long time ago. She's not as stupid as Plankton. But what about Plankton's nemesis, Mr. Krabs? Because Sandy has helped Mr. Krabs with a few things from time to time as well. Once she even went as far as setting up a laboratory underneath the Krusty Krab to do some food experiment in Krabby Patty Feature Creature. Now, speaking about working with Krabs, do you think it's possible that Sandy's the one helping Mr. Krabs to set up all the surveillance under the Krusty Krab in Truth or Square? Because she definitely could have done that. We also have other evidence from the episode The Fishbowl. One day, Sandy gets really into studying behavioral psychology. At first, she's studying some random fish on the bus, but everyone is clearly bothered, and then she gets kicked off the bus. Then she sees SpongeBob and Patrick and decides they're the perfect subjects. She observes them, but they don't act naturally. So she cuts the recording and lets them go, only to pull a trick by planting a ton of surveillance cameras and mics around SpongeBob's home to get some natural observations of them. So yeah, Sandy did use espionage tools to observe one time. Though she didn't really use the cutting edge stuff there, she just kind of throws some mics and big ass cameras everywhere and in plain sight. So Sandy might just be the one helping Krabs there. However, there's something odd in that theory, because do you think someone that sets up a surveillance camera would put one in her own home too? Because I see Sandy on one of the monitors too, right there. I don't think she's that oblivious. But maybe Sandy didn't work for anyone in Bikini Bottom. Our answer could be someone who doesn't reside underwater at all, because Sandy has some land-dwelling friends. The one person the show straight up calls Sandy's friend. Now, this is the evidence that actually sparks the whole Sandy is a secret spy conspiracy. In Feral Friends, Sandy is in the middle of a crisis because the green moon is devolving all the sea creatures, and when Sandy can't explain the phenomenon to Squidward, she opens up his smartwatch and straight up dials the French narrator.
Hello, French narrator speaking.
You see that? How there's no need for introduction in the conversation? He recognizes her immediately. I mean, of course, the man had Sandy's photo in a frame on his table. But then he does something even more important. He says he's been monitoring the green moon's behavior all day and explains exactly what it is, how often it happens, and how long it lasts.
I have been monitoring the behavior of the green moon all day.
So whatever Frenchie is, he's more than just a narrator. He's actively observing events in-universe and has information that Sandy doesn't. And just when you think it's a one-off bit, the show doubles down on SpongeBob's big birthday blowout, because there's one scene where SpongeBob meets with the French narrator and says,
Look! It's Sandy's friend Frenchie! Wee wee!
even SpongeBob knows him as Sandy's friend instead of a random scuba diver or the narrator. So yeah, that confirms Sandy does have a relationship with the Frenchie, close enough that she could contact him at any given time. However, we still don't have evidence of Sandy working for him as a spy. So what we have now is a way more specific question. What kind of relationship do they have? At this point, I can't honestly sit here and tell you that Frenchie is Sandy's boss. That would just be some strong assumption that's no better than fanfiction. What it does show is something simpler, and honestly, more believable. Sandy, a mammal from the surface world, is a scientist learning about Bikini Bottom life, and Frenchie is another mammal from France who is literally monitoring Bikini Bottom because they're making this show. It could just be two outsiders doing what fellow scientists do, sharing notes about this new eccentric wildlife. Sandy calls him when something weird happens, and Frenchie calls her when he needs to know about something. That's why they're labeled as friends. Even the craziest idea I could think of is that, based on what happened in Feral Friends, Frenchie could just be intentionally helping Sandy to save the day in Bikini Bottom, because if she doesn't, the show wouldn't continue anymore. And it'll just be another National Geographic channel. I'm afraid that's the whole explanation. Disappointing, I know, or so I thought. Just when I thought this theory was going to end in classic wholesome stuff, Nickelodeon actually put up a real answer to this spy theory to stop it from being pure speculation. Because for years, the spy theory had one big problem. We never had any proof that Sandy's research actually affects Bikini Bottom in a way that benefits someone above the surface. Then, the Sandy movie happened in 2024.
My speciality is marine biology, so I knew Bikini Bottom was a place for me.
Now, aside from the quality of the movies and how we feel about the movie itself, we can't toss aside the fact that they basically admit that Sandy's been doing research as a marine biologist. Sandy openly talks about collecting data on life in Bikini Bottom. She also identifies BOOTS, B-O-O-T-S, which stands for Bureau of Official Texas Science, as the lab she works for. Some labs in her hometown, finally. As for the plot of the movie, it's basically about some blue-haired villain lady kidnapping all of Bikini Bottom because she wanted to keep fish as eternal pets. And she's using Sandy as a spy to get information.
Thanks to your scientific research, sheeps.
I didn't know that you were using me to spy on Bikini Bottom.
Sandy realizes the ugly truth. She was being used to spy on Bikini Bottom. Then Sandy and the gang fought her and saved the whole town. Yay! So no, Sandy isn't a spy in the evil double agent sense, but she is a spy in a somewhat realistic way, as an unwitting asset. She's only a scientist making observations that someone else turns into surveillance. And if we treat this movie as canon, then the Frenchie connection doesn't have to be some conspiracy anymore. It can just be the same pipeline as the blue-haired lady. Sandy gathers observations, and Frenchie uses those observations to make sure the show keeps running. Sometimes they share them, and depending on who controls the system above them, Sandy's observations can become a weapon, thus making her a spy to some extent. So, that's the verdict. If you came into this video expecting Sandy to be some cold-blooded double agent working for Frenchie, I'm sorry to disappoint you. Our answer is something way more realistic, and honestly, still kinda wholesome. Wow. So yeah, the Sandy spy theory is solved in more than just one way. And I guess that's why the theory has always felt true since back then. Even when the show never fully commits to it, we just need one canon scene. For the past few days, I've been digging into something I haven't revisited in a long time. SpongeBob SquarePants, the Bikini Bottom outbreak. You might be more familiar calling it the SpongeBob Infection AU. It's a long-running comic-style story created by ICPs on TikTok and Instagram. And if you've read it, you already know it leaves a lot of questions behind. Details that look small at first suddenly matter later in the plot. Pieces of character cards show up out of order. Some rules seem to shift, others don't. The more you read, the more it feels like the story is trying to show you something the characters themselves never fully understand. Almost like the big explanation is there, just buried under the chaos. So I went back. I reread everything, all 28 chapters, in order, and started lining up every clue that the story gives us. And finally, I found something really, really interesting. Because I actually might have just solved this outbreak and revealed Plankton's true plan. The story opens on what looks like an ordinary day at the Krusty Krab. Fred sits down to eat a Krabby Patty. We can also see his status card here, showing his state of hunger, thirst, sanity, and his belongings. Meanwhile, SpongeBob and Squidward are talking about how the place feels strangely empty. Things have felt a little less miserable, as Squidward says. And in the back office, Mr. Krabs is already in bad shape, but at this point of the story, we don't know why. Things fall apart fast in the next chapter, once Fred's eye suddenly pops out while he's running. Now his status has become infected, and he's marked as Stage 1 infection. Hungry, unstable, and looks agitated. And before SpongeBob and Squidward even know what's happening, we learn Krabs became infected earlier than anyone else. He's already turned into a breathing corpse that only speaks gibberish. He's the real patient zero here. We also learned that Plankton is already dead by this point in the story. It was said that Plankton couldn't realize that his own invention would inevitably also become his death. Remember this, it's a detail that becomes important later. Karen's card also shows up here, saying she's immune to the infection since she's, well, a robot. SpongeBob and Squidward immediately run to the chum bucket for shelter since they learned that the infection was already all over the news. She asks them if they saw Plankton at the Krusty Krab, but they didn't. Karen is the first one to piece together that something made by Plankton is spreading across Bikini Bottom, but she doesn't know how yet. All she knows is that Plankton was working on something, but he never told her the full plan. Too bad, Karen. I don't think Plankton can come home anymore. The two of them didn't stay for long since they decide they should search for Patrick and Gary. Out on the streets, things get worse quickly. Civilians start turning, Mrs. Puff gets bitten by Fred, my leg, Rashid, and we get a flashback to the day before the outbreak where Krabs shows off a new batch of patties he bought from a cheap supplier. This is already strange. Krabby Patties are always made in-house, so the fact that these were ordered from outside is the first real clue that something is very wrong. Unfortunately, Krabs did eat the new patties earlier that day for breakfast, and he turned into a living corpse in less than a day. SpongeBob quickly figures things out. He tells Squidward Fred and Mr. Krabs got sick right after eating the new batch of patties, but Squidward doesn't want to think about it now. On the other hand, Pearl is shown getting jumped by the freshly turned Mrs. Puff. As the infection spreads, more pieces start falling into place. Plankton's worm project is explained. He modified parasitic worms with the intention of taking over people's minds so they would obey his commands. 4 infection stages are introduced, each one more destructive than the last. What's scary is that in the first stage itself, the infection could already pop out your eyes and make your body rot, with the final 4th stage stopping your heart, taking out both eyes, and losing both your arms and legs, or as people like to call it, the pickle stage. SpongeBob finds Patrick next, and sure enough, he somehow slept through the entire outbreak. This is also where they had their first bloody encounter with the infected. Patrick instantly jumped and bashed in the infected skull with his hand hammer, but there's more coming their way, so they run off to Goo Lagoon. On the other side of town, Pearl actually survives an infected Mrs. Puff ambush because she somehow brought a knife with her. Just realizing the condition, Pearl's crying for her dad's help, so she makes a run for the Krusty Krab to look for safety. We all know this won't end happily for Pearl. Karen finally manages to find some notes on Plankton's infected Krabby Patties experiment. It was revealed that he's the one making the cheap patties and then selling them to Krusty Krab. But he also added that, just in case anything goes wrong, I've made an antidote since I wouldn't want to kill anybody. But he didn't specify the cure. Things get chaotic fast once they reach Goo Lagoon. There aren't any infected around at first, but it doesn't stay peaceful for long. A whole horde charges at them, forcing SpongeBob, Squidward, and Patrick into their first real fight. Squidward actually snaps first here and starts thrusting his clarinet, showing how desperate he is. They're cornered and out of options by the time infected Larry shows up, looking like a final boss fight. And just when it looks like they're finished, Sandy drops in and takes out Larry with a karate kick. Apparently her diving suit gives her some serious protection. The infected can't pierce the suit easily, so Sandy becomes the group's strongest fighter by default. But her suit is far from perfect, and we start to see bites denting her armor. Meanwhile, Pearl finds the remains of her father. He's already at stage 4, which means the worms have left his body. She also met Gary there and brought him to the Chum Bucket, where Karen is slowly turning the restaurant into a safe house. Stress is building, more and more infected show up, and yet people are still not taking it seriously. Perch Perkins even goes out to report the situation on the streets without any protection. Patrick becomes the next big problem. Since he's in a constant state of hunger, he's been secretly eating patties, not knowing the risk. Later that night, he turns, attacks Squidward, and manages to bite off his right arm before they can stop him. Sandy quickly pulls apart Squidward's hands to prevent the infection from spreading further. Sandy's helmet also cracks in the process. 2 weeks have passed and the streets are heavily infested with the infected. One massive kraken is sitting on top of Sandy's tree dome, meaning she can't go back to repair her helmet or create any powerful weapons. More people take shelter in the Chum Bucket, and some are desperate enough to eat infected meat. Pearl is now basically Sandy's personal assistant in researching this infection. That line from Karen, though, absolutely heart-wrenching and ironic at the same time. Back with the main group, the three of them are hiding under Patrick's rock. It makes sense, since technically, it is the most reinforced home on Conch Street. But SpongeBob still can't help worrying about Gary. He asks the group every day if they can search for Gary again, but of course, Squidward and Sandy refuse. 11 days earlier, a day after Patrick got infected, SpongeBob brought up a story from the previous night to Squidward. He said Patrick looked like he recognized him with one stare and then walked away. He adds, maybe everyone infected isn't as mindless as they thought. But of course, Squidward is just disgusted by the idea itself. He insisted that the zombie wasn't Patrick anymore, and thanks to him, he lost an arm. This 14th chapter also gives us a few character cards. Mrs. Puff, Larry, and Patrick are shown to be still alive despite all the damage they've taken. What's also interesting is that both Mrs. Puff and Larry are still in stage 1 of their infection after 4 days. I guess since their infection rate is slow, unlike Krabs and Fred who reach stage 3 and 4 in less than a day. This means there are some factors affecting their infection rate, but we don't know what yet. Back at Chum Bucket, Karen and Pearl manage to trap Mrs. Puff. By studying her infected body, Karen discovers that the worms aren't dangerous outside of a person's body, they're only harmful once they get inside of you. In the next chapter, we see Old Man Jenkins having a short, heartwarming conversation with his grandkid. The kid said he found edible kelp jerky, which is rare considering the situation they're in. Back on Conch Street, SpongeBob made up his mind to not wait for Squidward and Sandy to search for Gary. Equipped with a pistol, SpongeBob goes outside again and meets infected Harold. SpongeBob tries to talk with him, but he's forced to shoot Harold when he gets attacked. By now, SpongeBob is starting to feel really guilty about killing the innocent infected. Sad news then came from the Chum Bucket. The infected Mrs. Puff hasn't survived and died in custody. Karen admits it was her fault for not feeding her, but decides to just push forward by dissecting her remains. The chapter opens with Jenkins and his grandson already infected at stage 1, and it turns out the jerky itself carries the infection. This is one of the biggest clues that the outbreak is not limited to Krabby Patties, or bites from another infected. Back in the lab, Karen dissects Mrs. Puff and finds something strange. The worms destroyed almost everything except the brain. This becomes one of the most important contradictions in the entire AU. Pearl finds Plankton's files under Gary's bed, which immediately makes her suspicious. She thinks Gary's hiding something from her and Karen. Karen reads through the files and finds a log of Plankton's notes. The reverse of the effects is easy. Simply feed the parasite some chum, and the effects are reversed. We're not told how or why, we just know Plankton considered chum to be the key. The story jumps to 1 month after the outbreak. Karen manages to lure Patrick in and feed him some chum. Now Patrick is undergoing treatment for a level 2 infection. He becomes docile, not perfectly cured, but stable. On the other side of town, SpongeBob, Squidward, and Sandy regroup and call themselves the Dreamers, trying to fight back against the outbreak. Though I have to say, each of those three dreamt different things entirely. Sandy's now wearing her green karate gloves, ready to fight the infected. Squidward's arms have been replaced by steel blade tentacles for fighting purposes, ready to get his revenge. And for SpongeBob, he's not sure about getting rid of the infected like this, at least for now. Still, it's better than trying to find Gary alone. The trio goes through town, clearing infected. Squidward gets dangerously into it. He's destroying the blood way too much. But SpongeBob still refuses to let go of his guilt. SpongeBob posts missing Gary flyers everywhere. Squidward points out that almost no one alive will see them, but SpongeBob insists maybe Gary will. They're startled by a random fish who jumps out of the shadows. Squidward panics and kills him instantly, only to realize he wasn't infected. This becomes another breaking point for Squidward. Back at the chum bucket, Patrick is recovering further, bandaged and talking normally again, but we still don't know what happens to the worms inside him. Sandy's suit takes more damage each day. The trio returns to Goo Lagoon for another clearing mission, and in the middle of the fight, SpongeBob hesitates, loses focus, and lets Larry attack Sandy from behind. He smashes her helmet completely in a single strike. Without oxygen, Sandy can't survive. She begs Squidward to finish it quickly, and Squidward obliges. It's truly one of the darkest moments in the entire AU. SpongeBob breaks down while Squidward tries to comfort him, but you can see he's hollowed out too. Squidward is exhausted. His robot arm is wearing down, plus his ankle is injured. SpongeBob is physically fine, but mentally collapsing. At one point he says, "It's all about the meaning, Squidward," but it's clear that he is barely holding everything together. Meanwhile, at the chum bucket, Karen logs that the cure works, but not completely. Cured people act strange, refuse to talk about what they went through, and are eating huge amounts of chum. And at this rate, they are running out of chum fast. The Flying Dutchman appears, complaining that he can't find recruits because too many fish are missing limbs. Even he admits he can't reverse the parasite. Another chapter started with SpongeBob dreaming of Sandy and Patrick catching jellyfish with him, but they soon fade away. His sanity drops even lower. Things are getting worse at the chum bucket. The cured eat through the remaining chum like pigs. In the middle of it, Karen asks Pearl, "Do you know what chum is made of?" That line truly sends chills down my spine. Right in the next chapter, Karen gives the refugees extra chum, and suddenly, the supply problem disappears. The chum bucket residents are full and content. Back under the rock, Squidward tries to lift SpongeBob's spirits. We see their updated stats. Squidward felt weaker by the day and was holding on to his medications. SpongeBob's sanity is almost gone now. He can barely speak. On the other hand, Karen and Pearl begin selecting expendable survivors, elderly, weak, or alone, and killing them to make more chum. Pearl hates every second of it, but Karen insists it's for the greater good. Gary gets his own status card here, which gives another layer to this mystery. He knows the truth right after reading Plankton's cure notes. He thinks the chum bucket is doomed right from the start, so he leaves. In Chapter 23, right after clearing Krusty Krab from the infected, SpongeBob and Squidward finally reunite with Gary, the happiest moment SpongeBob's had in a long time. Unfortunately for those at Chum Bucket, Patrick and the Doctor fight over their portions of chum. Patrick accidentally bites the Doctor. But when Pearl scolded him about it, Patrick said he didn't mean to and then continued crying. 1 month and 3 weeks into the outbreak, things are eerily quiet. Lots of those who got infected have died. The dreamers sleep peacefully for the first time in ages. Gary wonders if anyone else in town is sleeping as peacefully as SpongeBob, or if the rest of Bikini Bottom is suffering in silence. We see the fates of various characters. Squilliam fled to Rock Bottom right from the first day. King Neptune abandoned his duty. His daughter Mindy stayed to help survivors. Some people, like Bubble Bass, gone from starvation in his own basement. Even our senile heroes, Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, tried to fight and got infected in the end. SpongeBob's parents are alive but starving in their home. Meanwhile, Grandma SquarePants is still missing after searching for her grandson. Soon after, Gary keeps leading the group to Chum Bucket. It looks like he knows something, and they're right. They find wounded Patrick outside the Chum Bucket. SpongeBob immediately wants to bring him home, and even though Patrick hisses, he insists Patrick won't hurt them. Squidward disagrees for safety reasons, but SpongeBob wins. The Chum is basically useless now. More and more people are feeling anxious, especially after noticing more and more people leaving the Chum Bucket. Their last medical hopes, the doctor, has also turned. To make things worse, this time Pearl confesses she let Patrick eat from the trash and then leave. Luckily, one of the big revelation moments came from Squidward. After killing yet another infected, he notices there's chum inside them. A huge clue. The infection and the cure are mixing. Squidward is suspicious. He realizes the infected might all be coming from the Chum Bucket. In Chapter 27, Karen keeps doubling down on the greater good. SpongeBob is acting more confident now that Patrick is back. Even though Patrick still can't enjoy normal food, he's only enjoying chum. Inside, Tom catches Karen in Pearl's operation, but Pearl hits him with a bat before he can escape. The survivor wakes up tied to a chair. Pearl now fully commits to this act for the greater good. She kills Tom without a second thought. It's just brutal. At the same time, Squidward finally convinces SpongeBob and Patrick that something is wrong with the Chum Bucket. Too many infected are carrying chum. They're about to check it out when a woman bursts out of the restaurant screaming, "The lady at the Chum Bucket is killing people for the cure!" And that's where the story halts. Just 28 chapters of chaos and lots of clues. Now, after we've walked through the entire timeline, the tragedy is clear. We know who turned first, how fast the infection spread, and how everyone responded to it. But this is also the part where the story quietly becomes messy. Plot-wise, we never fully understand what we're actually dealing with. And weirdly enough, if you line up every clue from all 28 chapters, some details in this Outbreak story don't match each other at all. But let me tell you, these inconsistencies aren't mistakes at all. They're hints from ICPs. So all we need to do is lay out every strange detail that the story never explains. Because when you put all these side by side, the answer pretty much reveals itself. First things first, Karen said the worms never touch the brain. But one of the very first things the victims lose is their consciousness. Their minds practically go after they lose their first eye. Why is that? Then we have the cure from Plankton's note. He said fresh chum will reverse the infection. Rotten chum only makes it worse, and normal food does nothing to the infected. These modified parasitic worms clearly behave like picky eaters. What's with all the chum exclusivity? Why aren't the cures some sort of antidotes or antibiotics? And the infection itself is supposed to be through food, right? You should only get infected by eating the patties. Except, that's not what happens anymore. Fred infects Mrs. Puff by biting her. Patrick infects the doctor the same way. The worms are moving through saliva. It even gets stranger from here. The kelp jerky the kid finds also spreads the infection, even though that jerky isn't from Krusty Krab at all. As we can see, both Old Man Jenkins and the kid don't have any bite marks in Chapter 15, so the contamination wasn't isolated, it was already out there without anyone noticing. And then there's Patrick's case. He's one of the few characters who turns, recovers a bit, and still stays dangerous. Cured people also refuse to talk about what happened to them. The infection never fully leaves. Something is still wrong there. Speaking of minds, Larry remembers everything in Stage 1. Why is that? Does it also confirm SpongeBob's suspicion that Patrick, too, remembers something when he first turned? That's why he's leaving without any further fights. Then we learn that in stage 4, Mr. Crab's heart is still beating for some time even after the worms leave his body entirely. What makes them leave? If they're really eating their host so much that it starts to get rotten right away, why not eat everything till nothing's left? You see, on their own, these details seem confusing, but when you put them together and compare them with how parasitic worms behave in real life, the infection suddenly makes perfect sense. One of the biggest confusions in this story came because Plankton left vague notes separately. Even his wife is having trouble understanding them. The real clue we need isn't the fact that Plankton built a mind control worm that malfunctioned. It's that he created something much simpler, and it works too well. And once you understand what these worms were actually designed to do, everything will make sense. Most people read this AU assuming Plankton made some classic mind control worm. It's only natural since Plankton himself said so. Something that crawls into your brain, takes over your thoughts, and turns you into a loyal zombie soldier. Kind of like those helmets from the 2004 movie. But when you actually pay attention to what these worms do in the story, that idea falls apart immediately. The worms don't go near the brain. They don't improve coordination. They don't boost aggression on purpose. And they definitely don't create loyal soldiers. If anything, the first thing they do is kill him, so that already tells you the plan didn't work. What these worms really do is something way simpler than mind control. They eat. Constantly. Aggressively, and most importantly, uncontrollably. And when you look at all the symptoms through that lens, the body rotting, the non-stop hunger, the pain, the madness, even the craving for chum, every single thing lines up perfectly with one type of parasite. A heavily modified intestinal worm that survives by eating the host from the inside and pushes the host's body into panic mode so the host tries to eat more food for them. Something that's similar to tapeworms in real life, but jacked up by huge chunks of steroids. Once you see it in that way, every contradiction in the story suddenly makes sense. Why don't the worms attack the brain? Well, because real parasitic worms almost never do. The brain has nothing they want. No nutrients, no acids, nothing to digest. A parasite that destroys the brain basically kills its own home. But the stomach, or the bloodstream, organs, those keep the host alive long enough for the parasites to keep feeding. And in this AU, that's exactly what they do. They eat you from the inside out. Okay, but then why do infected characters lose their sanity first? I mean, because they're literally being eaten alive. Their bodies are panicking non-stop. The pain alone would be unbearable. Any animal under that kind of pain and hunger would stop thinking clearly. You would hallucinate too if something was chewing through your insides 24/7. So the madness we see isn't mind control. It's the host's brain trying to survive overwhelming pain. I think that also explains why most of them refuse to elaborate on the experience. It's just a traumatic experience. This also explains why the infection spreads through bites. Worm larvae can travel through blood and saliva. If an infected fish bites you, the worms just go straight into your wound. And then the next big question is, why does chum work at all? And this is where Plankton's actual mistake shows. I think Plankton's real plan is to modify the worms to respond to chum. So in theory, the infected host would crave chum, walk into the chum bucket, and boom, instant customer. That was the plan, but he never accounted for one thing. The worms get hungry faster than the host can feed them. So when they run out of food, they start eating the host's organs. That's what caused the decay in the first place. And chum? Chum doesn't kill the worms, it just buys time. That's why Patrick starts stabilizing the moment they shovel chum into him. The worms finally stop chewing him. Which brings us to another weird detail people notice. Different characters decay at different speeds. Krabs and Fred fall apart in less than a day, Mrs. Puff slowly, Larry barely at all, and Patrick manages to bounce in and out. That's just simple biology. Everyone's body is different. Larry is strong, he has high muscle mass, good blood flow, and his body simply holds out longer. Mrs. Puff is smaller and already stressed, so she collapses quicker. Patrick is right in the middle. He breaks, then stabilizes once he has a non-stop chum supply. And Krabs? He ate a ton of contaminated patties on an empty stomach. He basically loaded himself with worms in one sitting. No wonder he went down fast. And on top of that, we also have to consider how many worms each character was exposed to. 1 patty? 10 patties? A quick bite? A full bite? The dose makes a difference. Once you take all this into account, the entire outbreak starts being a very predictable chain reaction from one huge mistake. So now that the worms make sense, we can finally talk about the part nobody ever figures out on the first read. What Plankton was actually trying to do. Because Plankton was never trying to build an army. He wasn't even aiming to hurt anybody. He was, very simply, trying to make people crave chum. That's the whole plan. He engineered a parasite that lives in the stomach, detects chum, and rewards the host brain whenever they eat it. Eat chum, feel good. Eat more chum, feel even better. People will walk into the chum bucket automatically. It's still pretty messed up, but it's also very Plankton. A cheap shortcut to getting customers. But there's another fact that Plankton ironically forgot to account for despite going to college. He made them prefer chum, while chum is just minced or ground fresh fish, which means the worms were programmed to crave the exact thing Bikini Bottom residents are made of. So yes, the people started craving chum, but they also started craving each other. Once the host hasn't eaten chum in a while, the worm just thinks, hey, we ran out of chum. But you know what chum is made of? Our host. That's why every infected character is starving. That's why they look like they're rotting from the inside. Simply because the worms are screaming for food, and the host's brain is trying to satisfy whatever pain signal is killing them from the inside. Suddenly, Patrick's weird half-recovery isn't weird at all, huh? He only stabilizes because he has a fresh supply of chum. But he's still dangerous because the worms are still there, still multiplying, just fed well enough to not eat him alive. Same thing with the cured people at the chum bucket. As long as Karen keeps feeding them good chum, they don't lose their minds. And Karen? Oh boy, she figures that out way too late. She thinks chum's saving them, not realizing it's only delaying the inevitable. Half of it is Plankton's doing too, if you think about it. It's possible that the whole chum is the cure message Plankton leaves is for deceiving Karen. After all, Karen is known to sabotage Plankton's plan if anything goes out of hand, right? Plankton might have anticipated Karen's intervention once his plan worked, so when Karen tries to stop him by searching for the cure, she will only find chum is cure notes and proceed to help him sell more chum. It's a well thought out plan, truly, if only he didn't make any mistakes. And that brings us to the final piece nobody ever talks about. Stage 4. When Squidward starts noticing chum inside infected bodies, that's the moment the real horror of this story comes to the surface. Because in the AU, Stage 4 is described as the worms leave the body. But they don't leave because the host is healed. They leave because they've eaten everything they can reach. The host is barely alive. There's nothing left to consume. It's the end for the host, but not for the parasites. Once the worms exit, they're starving. They need to get to a new host fast. And they'll take whatever they can get. A nearby survivor, a pile of chum, or even worse, any source of food. And this is where everything suddenly clicks. The kelp jerky. Yes, I think the sole reason for the kelp jerky being able to spread the infection because it was just food that got exposed to worms that had already abandoned a stage 4 body. The kid found it, ate it, and started the cycle all over again. And suddenly, without changing a single thing from the original story, the whole outbreak becomes clear. Plankton didn't create a mind control parasite. He created a worm that rewards the host for eating chum and panics when it doesn't get enough. But he accidentally gave it a bottomless appetite, a taste for fresh fish, and multiple ways to spread, through bites, saliva, contaminated food, and eventually, anything left behind by a dying host. And everything that happens afterward, the madness, the cannibalism, the decaying bodies, the begging for chum, Patrick's partial recovery, Karen's desperation, all of it is just the natural fallout of that one mistake. The worms never mutated. They're just starving, exactly how parasites do. A completely predictable biological disaster, all because one guy wanted customers. And honestly, that's what makes this AU so interesting. The plot is so complex for SpongeBob standards, you might actually want this as an actual episode, but only if they leave out the gory stuff. Of course, All this could be wrong if ICPs ever comes back and simply says, "Nah, that's not what happens." But ICPs has never posted anything again since February of last year. So until then, I think this theory solves it. And at the end of the day, the Bikini Bottom outbreak is a reminder of what happens when desperation, fear, and bad decisions pile on top of each other until everything breaks. SpongeBob SquarePants is hiding one of the darkest world-building rules in kids' TV. You've probably noticed that in Bikini Bottom, the fish can wear each other's skin. Now obviously, some of these gags are just jokes, but some of them are genuinely concerning. And because the show does it so often, we've all just gotten used to it. It feels like just their thing, right? Nothing to see here. Well, that's what they wanted you to think. Because when you actually slow down and take a good look at every single one of these skin moments, you may notice something. Those skins are hiding the true secret of Bikini Bottom. Sounds crazy, right? I know. But after days worth of searching, I managed to collect all the evidence, enough to solve this mystery for you. And the scariest part, the show itself gives us subtle clues to prove that this is canon. Now, before I get way ahead of myself, I had to point out the part that actually makes sense, or at least almost makes sense. Some of these skin moments are actually clever biology jokes. For example, Patrick is a starfish, and if you know anything about starfish in real life, you know they can regrow arms if they're chopped off. In fact, that's how some of them reproduce in the first place. Same with SpongeBob himself. Sea sponges can break apart infinitely, and each piece can keep growing by itself. So when SpongeBob rips off his skin and later grows it back, yeah, it's weird, but it's still within sponge logic. Mr. Krabs? He's a crustacean, and crabs really do molt. They shed their shells and grow new ones as a part of their life cycle.
I've molted.
Even Gary losing his shell isn't too far-fetched. Snails in the real world sometimes abandon damaged shells and adapt into new ones. Sometimes it's not even a real shell that they use, it's just whatever's available and they live with it. It might be weird to see, but it's not unusual. This makes sense since Stephen Hillenburg, the creator of SpongeBob, was a marine biologist and even taught marine science before becoming a showrunner. So if you factor that in, these jokes are actually kind of clever details that only a biology nerd turned writer would sneak into a kid's cartoon. To be honest, if the show only did this kind of thing, I'd say, sure, skin theory is just SpongeBob writers geeking out about biology. A little gross, but nothing deeper. But that's also the trick. It's a clever smokescreen they put up to make us think it's just another goofy SpongeBob quirk. Because once you start digging, you'll realize the show keeps pushing the skin jokes further, past the line of science, past the line of logic, into something way more disturbing. Remember this one? SpongeBob using Mr. Krabs' entire shell and walking around pretending to be him. He even uses it to attend the Navy reunion pretending to be Krabs. And somehow, no one said anything about it? They just believe it's the real Eugene? These sailors literally served with Krabs for years. You're telling me they actually believe SpongeBob is Krabs just because he's wearing his shell? His eyes are different, his voice is different, even the way he speaks is different from the real Eugene, right? They're too busy admiring the almighty shell of Eugene Krabs to care who's actually inside it. And then it gets stranger. Plankton disguises himself by stealing Sandy's fur and uses it to trick everyone to get the Krabby Patty recipe, which is creepy enough for several reasons. Because one, that's not how squirrel fur works. A squirrel doesn't shed its own skin like crabs do. And two, what's worse is the disguise works. People are actually buying it. I mean, sure, technically this time is better since some people do notice that something feels off.
Sandy? You don't look so good.
No reason to be suspicious in any way, y'all.
But it surely can't feel right seeing a land mammal without both of its eyeballs. She's also walking around without her spacesuit, which is something she needs to be underwater. Does everyone just accept any kind of half-baked explanation as long as she's speaking with a Texas accent? Or is that just how Bikini Bottom works? It's just odd. And then it takes a hard left into full-on disturbing. Squidward greeting the kids while wearing salmon skin might seem absurdly funny at first, until you remember Squidward here is wearing someone else's body and face as a costume. Of course the kids threw rocks at him, they're just freaked out by his costume choices. But then again, the redfish is actually looking like a prop costume. You can see the hole in the suits for his tentacles and it doesn't cover his face. So as scary as that sounds, it's just the equivalent of Kevin Hart wearing The Rock's look as a costume. But none of that compares to the next case, because arguably one of the most crazy and absurd skin moments in the show is the final sequence from I Had an Accident. Like, how? How did a gorilla get Patrick's skin in the first place? Patrick's gorilla suit is perfectly normal. Many of us humans wear gorilla costumes as a joke. But Patrick's skin? Where did you get that? I mean, I know Patrick did lend his skin suit to SpongeBob that one time in Bummer Vacation. But that was Patrick giving SpongeBob his own skin willingly. I don't think he's giving it willingly to this gorilla. Patrick himself seems surprised when he sees the gorilla. Then again, it is Patrick we're talking about. Maybe he just forgot that he gave it to the gorilla for some free ice cream before 4 p.m. Who knows? Now, every single clip I showed you always involves the main cast. SpongeBob, Squidward, Sandy, Patrick, Krabs. So maybe it's just their special thing for the plot? Like, maybe the show writers only let the main characters do this gag because they're the stars of the show. It's not like the regular fish walking around Bikini Bottom could do the same thing, right? Wrong. Actually, there are lots of fish in Bikini Bottom pulling the same skin suit stunts. A random mailman could shed his own skin twice and reveal entirely different kinds of fish each time. How many more does he have under that? How about this guy? The scammer who was disguised in his own injured skin to trick SpongeBob and Patrick. How does that work? Do you just keep all the skin you shed and store it for later use? Or is it something handmade, purely to scam people? Even some background fish at the Krusty Krab pulled off this stunt. He got the whole bodysuit of an entirely different fish and used it as a new identity. You'll catch fish with completely different faces, arms, and skin tones just swapped out on a daily basis, like they went shopping for parts and mixed them up that morning. And that raises a big suspicion. Maybe nobody bats an eye to those weird, out-of-place disguises because it's a normal thing in Bikini Bottom. Any fish could wear somebody else's skin and that's that? Nobody questions their identity? And if swapping skins is this common, then where's it all coming from? You don't just stumble across spare skins or body parts lying around. That means there has to be an entire economy behind it. At this point, it starts to feel like Bikini Bottom is hiding a full-blown black market for bodies. Wait, they do. They sell it freely and legally.
So please, browse our extensive wall of noses.
Patrick goes in to have a nose extension surgery one time. Yeah, he did. And strangely, nobody treats it like horror. It's just, hey, Patrick's got a nose now, like going to the dentist. What's also concerning is that the place is called Nose and Things. Does that mean they have other body parts in there? Ears and mouths, maybe?
I heard that.
Yeah, they do. Which means this isn't even a hidden crime. This is just the world they live in. This is their version of consumer culture. You can swap out parts of yourself at will and society just shrugs. And it doesn't stop at that. Bikini Bottom is full of products built on this idea. Remember anchor arms?
Well, now you too can have muscles. With anchor arms! Just add air.
They sell inflatable muscles as if it's gym gear. The entire commercial is just fish buying fake limbs to impress people. And if there's anything we know about these modified body parts, it's that they aren't really built to last. Patrick's new nose got destroyed just by the sheer amount of stink by the end of the episode. And the anchor arms are basically just cosmetic, without any real muscle. So I take it there's some limit to this kind of stuff, but then there's also another body modification project that not only changes their physique, but goes so far as to alter their personalities. In Abrasive Side, SpongeBob gets a rough side that he attaches to his back to stop being such a people pleaser. But it did much more than help him say no.
Oh, I certainly said... No, can't do, you brainless lab rat.
I need you to work an extra 17-hour shift tonight.
Oh, sure, mister. Sorry, Krabs, I'm busy. Unless you're paying me overtime.
That abrasive sponge brings out SpongeBob's bitter side and makes him roast people left and right, which is actually kind of nice. I really like seeing SpongeBob roasting people. Anyway, don't forget the medical professionals. Remember the snail doctor from I Was a Teenage Gary? Look at him. His hands are clearly different from his body. They're different colors, and instead of fins like regular fish, he has hands, complete with 5 fingers. They're definitely not his real hands. It does have some justifications though. If you're a doctor performing surgeries on a daily basis, I guess it's helpful to have human hands rather than just fins, right? Then again, if your doctor shows up with arms taken from a totally different species and nobody even blinks, that means this culture is already built for it. At this point, I think we can stop pretending it's random cartoon nonsense. This show is giving us a clear answer. Bikini Bottom has an entire hidden economy built on skin swapping and body modification. Clinics, shops, products, scams, surgeries, it's all there. The only reason it feels hidden is because the characters treat it like it's normal, and the only one who thinks it's weird are just us, the viewers. And the wildest part, if you really think about it, SpongeBob and Patrick themselves might be right in the middle of it. He knows how to handle skins, he's done it before, he knows how they work, he knows how they trick people. And when you look at his lifestyle, it actually makes sense. He's a fry cook at one of the lowest paying jobs in town, yet somehow, some way, he's always got new props, costumes, furniture, even entire rooms full of gadgets. Way more than his paycheck should ever cover. Where's that money coming from? Well, maybe flipping burgers isn't his only gig. Maybe SpongeBob's other job, the one nobody talks about, is flipping skins. Selling, trading, moving parts through Bikini Bottom's underground market. Think about it. His body regenerates infinitely. That means an infinite source of material. SpongeBob can literally print money with his own body. The same could be said about Patrick, since he's another person with infinite regenerating ability. Well, maybe not with Patrick. The guy still lives under a rock with 90% of his furniture made from sand. He even loves to eat sand for breakfast, and the only times he ever gets some real food is at the Krusty Krab, and he almost never pays for it. We've seen it time and time again, Patrick getting scolded by crabs because of his enormous tab. Such a shame, Patrick. Your body is literally made out of gold and you're too stupid to cash it in. You could buy as many Krabby Patties as you wanted if you only knew. Wait, is that how he always pays his patty bills? It always baffles me why Krabs the cheapskate still gives Patrick Krabby Patties again and again, even though it's proven that Patrick never has any money in his wallet. Does he just trade his body parts or skin to pay Krabs? That also means maybe the Krusty Krab itself isn't just a restaurant. Burger joint in the front, skins in the back. And if that's true, does it mean the skin theory canonically explains the secret Krabby Patty recipe too? It's just fish meat and skin all along? Even if that's halfway true, then the Krusty Krab is feeding them themselves. Anyway, even if you set aside the recipe, the point still stands. But that still doesn't answer all of our curiosities. Because let's just say this is the normal way of their world, and they've lived like this for quite a long time. Then we've got to ask the next big question. Why? Why does Bikini Bottom, out of all places, normalize this kind of thing? How did this culture even arise in the first place? Again, the show never really answers this, so it's up to us fans to interpret it. And wouldn't you know it, I already have a guess, as always. The easiest way to explain it is to compare it straight away to something we already have in real life, plastic surgery. For humans, the practice of body modifications has been widely known since the 70s, and is routinely used for both medical and aesthetic reasons. The thing is, those surgeries and body modifications usually stop at small changes. Nose jobs, implants, tattoos, hair transplants. You can only tweak or replace what you already have. You can't just wake up and decide, yeah, I think I'll have tentacles today. But under the sea, the rules are completely different. Think about it. Us humans, though we come in different races, still share the same body features. One head attached to the torso, 2 arms and hands, and 2 legs with feet. That's pretty much it. But the ocean is packed with thousands of species, each with wildly different bodies. Some have shells, some have claws, some have giant teeth, stingers, or even bioluminescence for those who live without the sun. Some creatures can literally change color and shape on command. And you're telling me that all these fish just accept the body they're born with? Of course not. It makes total sense that in a place like Bikini Bottom, body envy becomes a cultural obsession. I wish I had claws like a crab. I wish I had tentacles like a squid. I wish I was fast as a dolphin. And thanks to clinics, surgeries, and products, they can actually do it. What started as small enhancements, like Patrick wanting a nose, could spiral into full transformations. Then companies started selling new parts like fashion accessories. Anchor arms weren't about strength, they're just aesthetics for identity. And eventually, it wasn't even about looking good anymore. It was about experimenting, mixing and matching body parts just to see what you could become. Of course, they also had an option for someone who just wanted to look like they were in better shape, without a huge commitment to surgery like Patrick. So they started selling full body costumes that could be worn on a daily basis, like for the fish at the Krusty Krab. When you think about it that way, all the skin gags suddenly make sense. They're the byproduct of living in the most diverse ecosystem on Earth, where everyone is constantly surrounded by creatures with abilities you'll never have. And in that environment, it's only natural that an entire culture would form around body modification by literally trading skins, organs, and features like they're collectibles. Which brings us back to the show. Because once you accept that this obsession exists, suddenly all those bizarre skin moments in SpongeBob start popping back into your head. And that's when we get to the part that creeps me out the most. Because skin theory doesn't just explain biology gags or scam characters. It actually explains some of the weirdest plot points in the whole show. Once you accept that skin theory, the show itself starts to look completely different. Let's go back to some of the strangest skin moments and watch them again through this lens. Remember this one? SpongeBob fools everyone in the Navy with Krab's shell, and nobody bats an eye. But if skin swapping is the real cultural norm, then the Navy sailors don't question it because they've seen this before. They're used to friends showing up in recycled shells or skins. They're fooled because in their world, that's just life. Or this one. Plankton sneaks into Sandy's fur and uses it as a disguise. Now, in our world, that's pure nightmare fuel. I mean, imagine your close friend showing up without eyeballs or a spine. That's pretty terrifying. But in Bikini Bottom, it doesn't even get a second glance. Maybe Sandy just wanted to ditch her eyeballs for a while. Maybe she's tired of lugging a spine around. Maybe she's finally joined the sea creatures and swapped out her lungs for gills. In this world, you can't judge that. And then there's the mailman. His double shedding looks weird at first, like why would you need 2 extra bodies under your skin? But with skin theory, it's actually a sad story. Maybe he doesn't feel confident in his real body. Maybe his coworkers make fun of him, so he just slips on another skin to live a normal life as a mailman. When you look at it that way, Bikini Bottom actually feels like a pretty progressive place, a society that accepts diversity, whether it's natural or manufactured. Who would have thought? And then there's this.
Back inside yet? What's a gorilla doing underwater in the first place?
At face value, it's one of the most absurd endings in SpongeBob history. A gorilla rips off his Patrick skin and then rides off into the sunset with George the zebra. It's insane. But with skin theory in place, it weirdly makes sense. It's the ultimate confirmation that skin swaps exist in-universe as real, transferable identities. When the gorilla said, "They're onto us," and ran off with George, they're not talking about SpongeBob questioning the logic about why a gorilla and a zebra could breathe underwater. After all, it's a show where they had fire and a beach, Goo Lagoon, deep under the sea. That's not exactly mind-blowing. What is mind-blowing, however, is SpongeBob about to realize the true intentions of their attack. Notice that the gorilla just put Sandy and Patrick into the bag, but instantly snapped SpongeBob in half the moment it saw him. The gorilla just wants to get rid of SpongeBob. Now, here's where it gets wild. The gorilla goes so far as to disguise himself in Patrick's skin just to sneak onto Conch Street. It only blows its cover when suspicion arises. Why would anyone go through all that trouble? Unless the gorilla wanted SpongeBob's position as the fry cook at the Krusty Krab. Sounds ridiculous, right? But hear me out. Do you know who this gorilla is? That's right, he's the fry cook at the poop deck from episode Friend of Foe.
What? They let a smelly, hairy flea bag like that serve food?
I think he's just tired of working there. I don't blame him though. Working with Patchy the Pirate doesn't sound like the best gig. So what if this gorilla decided to make the jump, got himself modified to breathe underwater, traded Patrick's skin for some ice cream or whatever Patrick would agree to, then made his move? Eliminate SpongeBob and claim the spot as Krusty Krab's new fry cook. Alright, at this point I can already hear some of you thinking, what the hell, this theory seems far-fetched. Gorillas don't make any body modifications or take anyone's skin. How does that relate to the theory? Aha, but then, how do you explain this? because the same gorilla just made another appearance years later on Gorilla Suit Day in season 16. See that thing in his head? It's a fish gill. So yes, this confirms it. The same gorilla from I Had an Accident had body modifications in order to survive underwater. Or maybe he's wearing the skin of a real sea gorilla. This show has a sea bear one time, why can't they have a sea gorilla? And before you ask, are you sure that's not just some random sea gorilla and not the same one in I Had an Accident? I can assure you it's the same gorilla. I made sure to check the wiki pages for this. So there you have it. The show itself confirms this theory. Pretty wild, right? Anyway, now you understand that the skin theory is merely a reflection of society where identity is fluid and everybody's up for trade. Which begs the final and most disturbing question: if the everyday citizens of Bikini Bottom live like this, how many people are still real? Because if you ask me, the first thing that comes to mind when I think about the application of this theory is Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, and pretty much all of their villain nemesis. Think about it. On the surface, Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy are exactly what they look like. Parodies of Aquaman and his sidekick. Two retired human superheroes who just happen to live under the sea. At least, that's what we all thought growing up. But the details don't add up. For one, if they're supposed to be humans, why are they the exact same size as every other fish? Humans should tower over the residents of Bikini Bottom. Instead, they blend right in. Two, it's proven that their powers aren't natural gifts. Every ability they have comes from gadgets, utility belts, rings, contraptions. They don't control the sea creatures like Aquaman, they just fake it with technology. So here's the real possibility. Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy aren't humans after all. They're fish. Fish who modified themselves surgically and culturally to look like humans. Look at Mermaid Man's body. The starfish nose, the human-like lips, the upright stance. It's the exact same type of modification we've seen in other fish, just pushed further. And Barnacle Boy? He's literally a fish who swapped out almost everything until he became something else. I would bet the diving fins in his legs aren't diving fins at all. They're his actual fins, he just covers them up with boots. And it doesn't stop there. The same could be said about Man Ray. One time we even saw him take off his head and give it to SpongeBob, and he walks away fine without it. The mask could be a gadget after all. His real body is only from his torso to his legs. But the real punchline is that Bikini Bottom buys it. They accept these two legendary superheroes and every other villain not because what they do, but because of what they look like. Because in a culture obsessed with skins, the ultimate status symbol is wearing the body of something you could never truly be. And that's what skin theory has been pointing to all along. It's the hidden lore of this world that, oddly enough, explains all the weird stuff that happens in Bikini Bottom. There's a black market economy in Bikini Bottom running on skins and body swaps, and SpongeBob with his regenerating body is the perfect main character that quietly shows us how it works. That's how we can afford things a fry cook shouldn't be able to. That's why Patrick is always eating without paying. That's why the Krusty Krab itself feels bigger than just a burger joint. Because in the end, Bikini Bottom is powered by identity, by the skins you can trade, the bodies you can wear, and the lives you can borrow. Heroes, villains, even background citizens, they're all living proof of it. Which means skin theory isn't just some random fan theory anymore. It's the secret backbone of Bikini Bottom that canonically answered all of our questions about the show. How old is SpongeBob, really? I mean, he works a full-time job, owns a house, pays for Gary's healthcare, probably, but he also religiously watches Mermaid Man shows, plays with jellyfish nets, and still can't pass a basic driving test. Is he just a grown man acting like a kid? Or maybe he's a kid pretending to be a grown man? At some point, this stopped being just a running joke and started looking like a real question. I mean, the show itself teases us in SpongeBob's Big Birthday Blowout. Like they want us to keep guessing. And while the show has never given us a straight answer, it dropped some clues over the years. I did my research and fact-checked every single detail I found just so we have the most accurate answer. Yes, I'm that determined. But fair warning, the answer might not be what you think. The first and the most obvious clues is something you've probably already heard. The whole driver's license thing. Yeah, it's pretty much an open secret at this point. We get the glimpse of SpongeBob's driver's license all the way back in Season 1, Sleepy Time. There's a scene about SpongeBob driving race cars like a maniac in his dream and finally getting his license. And if you freeze frame it, you'll see his birthday, July 14th, 1986. That's our first clue. Also, happy birthday SpongeBob, though it's a bit late now. You see, the thing about this episode is that it's a dream sequence, where everyone including SpongeBob could just get what he wants. So, a lot of people really didn't believe in this license. Except one season later we get the episode No Free Rides, where he actually gets handed a real license by Mrs. Puff. And the date? Still, July 14th, 1986. And since this episode isn't a dream sequence, it's pretty safe to say the show recognizes July 14th as SpongeBob's birthday. The only concerns about this, however, throughout the modern season, the show has shown SpongeBob's driver's license again, quite a few times too. Like here, for example, is his driver's license from Season 6, Gone. And this is another one from Season 11, Girls' Night Out. I noticed that they removed the birth date from the license. I guess somewhere along the way, someone at Nickelodeon realized that details might tell SpongeBob's age, which contradicts the Hillenburg wish to keep SpongeBob's age ambiguous. But then again, they didn't change that detail in the early seasons, so we'll go with 1986 as our first clues. However, things also get tricky from here. Knowing when SpongeBob was born is only half the puzzle. The real problem is figuring out when the show actually takes place. Because if we know that, we could do the math. That's easy. But SpongeBob lives in this weird, timeless void. Characters don't really age, the timeline never really progressing, and the show itself never gives us a solid year. Well, they kinda do, actually, once, and that's where this timeline theory starts, and falls apart. One of the most popular timeline theories starts with an episode from Season 1, SB-129. You know, that one episode no one understands? Psst, that was pretty cool. You should definitely watch it. But if you still don't remember it, this is the one where Squidward accidentally locks himself in the freezer at the Krusty Krab and wakes up 2,000 years in the future. Yeah, that one. Now here's the important part. Right when Squidward was trapped in the freezer, the French narrator guy says,
2,000 years later.
And if you pause the scene after that, there's a calendar that shows the date, March 6th, 4017. Which means that present-day events of SpongeBob, everything leading up to Squidward's freezer meltdown, must have taken place on March 6th, 2017. Years after it's the episode actually coming out. So there it is, right? He was born in 1986, it's 2017, that makes SpongeBob 31 years old. Mystery solved, yeah! Well, not exactly. Because that same episode that confirmed SpongeBob's birth date, No Free Rides, also shows that his license expires in 2003. Meaning this show took place somewhere before the 2000s. And now you might be thinking, well, why didn't you just say that then? Why do you bother bringing up this episode? Because if the driver's license is valid for about 5 years, that would mean SpongeBob is 14 years old when the show premiered. So unless Mrs. Puff is handing out 12-year driver's licenses, the theory is not adding up. Well, no wonder the kid fails the driving test so much. Also, that would mean Mr. Krabs is hiring someone under 17 to work a full-time job at Krusty Krab. That's a serious crime. But then again, Krabs won't bother thinking about stuff like that. We've seen him do way worse things in the series. Anyway, back to our investigation again. If his license expires in 2003, then the show has to take place before that, not in 2017. Which means the whole year 2017 theory completely falls apart. You know, I think the time jump for Squidward isn't exactly 2,000 years. It's just around 2,000. The French narrator guy just said 2,000 because it's easier to say and not to look peculiar. But whatever, maybe the calendar itself is just a gag from the animator. Who knows? So if that timeline doesn't hold, where do we look next? Well, weirdly enough, it's not an episode from the main show. It's from the spin-off that no one asked for, but somehow gave us the biggest clue yet. Yes, I'm talking about Camp Coral, the CG spin-off from 2021 that was, yeah, kinda mid. But whatever your feelings are on the show itself, it does give us one solid piece of information. In Camp Coral, SpongeBob is shown to be 10 years old. I can't really confirm the other people's ages, but that's not interesting. What does interest me, on the other hand, is that we're shown a cute baby version of Pearl. Yes, in diapers too. That's the key to our mysteries. Now, if you remember season 4 of the main show, specifically the episode Whale of a Birthday, in that episode, SpongeBob is given a huge task by Krabs to figure out what Pearl would like for a birthday present. Her 16th birthday, to be exact. That indicates the main show was happening exactly 15 years after the Camp Coral timeline. And if SpongeBob was 10 years old during Camp Coral, he would be around 25 in the first episode. Which makes perfect sense, right? SpongeBob being in his mid-20s lines up with everything that we see. He's old enough to live alone, old enough to hold a full-time job, files taxes, probably, and still kind of acts like a hyperactive kid on cereal. That's just him being him, a fully grown adult sponge who never really grew up. Yep, Camp Coral might not be the canon we want, but it's the canon we need for this mystery. So while the show never says it out loud, the math checks out. SpongeBob is about 25 to 26 years old during the events of the main series, which means SpongeBob is 10 years older than Pearl when he's taking her to the prom in The Chaperone.
But as far as disasters go, that was really fun.
That's kind of weird to think about now. Shouldn't have said that. However, I just realized something interesting. Let's say the show starts when SpongeBob is 25, maybe 26. Fast forward 3 seasons and boom, the SpongeBob SquarePants movie. This is where the future timeline theory kicks in. In the movie, the story opens up about Krusty Krabs that's about to open his second establishment. And when SpongeBob is getting ready for the day, he says this.
Well, let's ask my wall of 374 consecutive Employee of the Month award.
374 Employee of the Month awards. Let that sink in. SpongeBob flips patties tirelessly for more than 31 years, until the age of 56, to get a chance of promotion to become a store manager. That's a crazy detail, considering half of the plot of the Goofy Goober movie is about SpongeBob and Patrick trying to act like a grown-up and stop being childish. It all kind of makes sense now. That whole Goofy Goober meltdown, it wasn't just about the manager's job, that was a midlife crisis. 30 years in the same job, overlooked and underappreciated, binging ice cream to escape reality. Old Man Sponge has been through it all. And weirdly enough, we never see him as manager again, or Krusty Krab number 2. Which makes the movie feel like a true finale, an arc about SpongeBob's future. Everything else after that, maybe that's all just flashbacks. On the other hand, I know some of you might disagree with this theory because many of us don't recognize Camp Coral as the real timeline, and how its separate timeline contradicts so many canon details from the main show. That's alright. Most of you might just choose to believe that 1986 is SpongeBob's birth date, and that's actually kinda justified. You see, the initial idea for SpongeBob came from the illustrated book drawn by Hillenburg himself in 1984. Well, at the time it wasn't SpongeBob yet, it was someone called Bob the Sponge. So maybe the first idea of the square-shaped sponge comes from 1986, hence why Hillenburg decided to put 1986 as his official birth date. With that being said, that would mean that SpongeBob is 39 years old this year. Older than some of us who grew up watching SpongeBob back in the day. That's kind of heartwarming, actually. And that's pretty much our answer. SpongeBob is 25, 39, pick your answer. But at least we know he's old enough to fry a Krabby Patty, but still young enough to fail his boating test again and again. Speaking about sponges, you know they don't age like we do, right? They kind of exist forever. Some deep-sea sponges have been alive for over 1,000 years, which means if you apply that kind of lifespan to SpongeBob, being 25 or 39 is kind of like being in preschool. And maybe that's why everyone in Bikini Bottom treats him that way. He's young for a sponge. But then again, we have that one random moment in The Great Patty Caper. SpongeBob narrates the whole episode to his grandson, who is also a sponge. And SpongeBob himself, shown to have gray hair, beard, glasses, and fragile. He even says it happened 75 years ago, which means SpongeBob is about 100 like a normal human? Which also means, yeah, he's not some ageless sea entity who could live for 1,000 years. I don't know, man. Or maybe the answer is simpler than that. Maybe SpongeBob doesn't have an age, because he doesn't need one. He's just whatever age the episode needs him to be, and honestly, that might be the most SpongeBob thing of all. Weird, right? SpongeBob SquarePants is often seen as one of the most lighthearted, chaotic shows in animation. But once in a while, they decide to drop something dark. And for many years, there has been one episode in particular heavily misunderstood by the fans. I'm talking about Earworms. An episode that seems like just another SpongeBob joke about catchy songs, until you understand the real message. When I went back to rewatch it, I expected a throwaway episode. Instead, I found strange details that I'd never noticed. Visual choices, dialogue, the way characters react, the way SpongeBob changes, something much more dark. And the song itself? Well, let's just say it's not as innocent as it sounds. So I followed that thread, and what I found was surprisingly jaw-dropping. It changed my whole impression of the episode, and I think I've finally solved the darkest episode of SpongeBob. Let's take a closer look and start from the beginning. The episode starts out like any other day in Krusty Krab's. SpongeBob's just doing what he always does, annoying Squidward with relentless enthusiasm. But instead of jellyfishing or karate chops, SpongeBob's latest obsession is a pop song called Musical Doodle. It's a peppy little jingle that plays on the radio while SpongeBob's cleaning the Krusty Krab, and for some reason, it's a jam. He doesn't just like the song, he loves it. He attaches to it. The song burrows into his head and he sings it practically all day. He hugs into the radio, singing it while flying home, and later even bought a vinyl to be played at home. Now, I know what you're all thinking. This is just a regular day of SpongeBob, right? Nothing out of the ordinary. But sadly, this is just the beginning. SpongeBob wasted no time playing the song once he got home. And after the song ends, he plays it again. And again. And again. SpongeBob was so infested with the song, he literally repeats the song until late at night. Even when he's trying to sleep, his body refuses to let go of the song. His lips whistling by themselves, even his pores start whistling the tune. This is giving me bad dreams. Eventually, SpongeBob gives in. He stays up all night looping the song, completely gives up on rest, just chasing that little serotonin kick like it's a drug. So the next morning, he stumbles into work like he's been hit by a bus. Dark circles, bloodshot eyes, jaw twitching. This man has seen things, or heard things. Mr. Krabs tells him to get it together, and SpongeBob responds by laughing. It's not even a happy laugh, it's the laugh of someone who's halfway through a breakdown. But instead of actually focusing on the job, SpongeBob keeps singing the song and hits us with a new strategy. I should stop fighting the Doodle's infectious groove. You know where this is going. From here on out, he spirals. He starts messing up orders, throws soda at the customer's face, refuses to hear any complaints, all while singing.
I asked for no onions! Young man!
Krabs definitely doesn't like it because he starts losing money, so he gave SpongeBob one last warning.
You gotta cut out that singing, boy!
SpongeBob tries to fight the song one last time, but it's just too strong. SpongeBob loses the fight and succumbs to the pressure, and this is where the madness starts. The kitchen turned upside down, lots of murals made from mustard on the walls. SpongeBob's laughing alone in the corner, talking to himself like he's stuck in a mental loop. The episode doubles down when Krabs confronts him.
You're done for the day.
SpongeBob suddenly goes feral and runs around on all fours while laughing. You know it's messed up when Patrick is speechless. Eventually, Sandy steps in and finally gives this madness a name. A literal earworm. A squirming musical parasite wrapped around SpongeBob's brain, force looping the song on repeat. And yes, it's a real worm next to his bluish brain. This episode also confirms that music-based brain parasites exist in Bikini Bottom. Cool. And the only way to cure him is by replacing the song with something catchier? Fortunately, his friends try to help. They swatted SpongeBob home, tie him to a chair, force him to listen to sea shanty and then Texas country songs, but neither works. It's only when Squidward plays his clarinet, out of tune, that the worm is finally forced out. The clarinet was basically audio tear gas. They gave the worm sonic trauma. And for a brief moment, you think it's over. SpongeBob collapses in relief, but then the worm turns, sees Squidward, and suddenly, it's his turn. The episode ends without resolution, but with a transfer. Like a curse that never leaves, it just finds a new host. So yeah, you could say it's a weird little episode about a catchy song, but everything about it, the decaying visuals, the frantic obsession, the eerie repetition, all of it feels too intense to be a joke. It all points to something much more intense. And that song? That doesn't sound like SpongeBob being silly. That sounds like a warning. Like the show is trying to tell us something and hopes we're paying attention. And the more I watched, the more I realized this wasn't just an episode about a song stuck in your head. I couldn't shake that feeling, so I started digging. The deeper I went, the clearer it became. This episode is hiding something. Actually, it's hiding a lot. So we're going to break it all down, 3 theories that could finally explain what earworm is really about. Some are psychological, some are symbolic, and one might just change the way you see SpongeBob completely. First theory is, this isn't just a catchy song. It's an evil brainwashing plan. Think about it. SpongeBob doesn't just like the song, he becomes possessed by it. He stops functioning and physically deteriorates. The song has hijacked his nervous system. I mean, if you actually listen to the lyrics of Musical Doodle, they're not just quirky or catchy, they're borderline dark. Infected. That's not an exaggeration, that's a diagnosis. The song isn't just stuck in his head, it's been engineered to stay there. Not because it's good, but because your brain can't stop needing it. One lyric even gives away the trick. It's a metaphor for dissociation, for losing your grip on reality while your body keeps going. The song becomes your new reality and you vanish inside the loop. And here's where it gets really dark. One moment in particular shows just how deep it runs. SpongeBob tries to sleep but can't, because his body is turned into a playback device. He's not singing anymore, he is the musical doodle. Some viewers even said the song got stuck in their heads for days after watching, which begs the question, did the worm get us too? But here's the question nobody asks. Where did it come from? And how did the worm infect SpongeBob? Who made this song? Did it just randomly spawn in your house like the nematoda? We never see the worm go inside SpongeBob, unless... does the worm come with the records? It all makes sense. SpongeBob was humming the song earlier in the day. Sure, he was a little obsessed, but he was still SpongeBob. Then he brings home the vinyl with that unnerving, smiling face printed on it, and everything changes. After it hits the turntable, it's over. What if the record is the delivery system, and the singer, the one belting out those eerie hypnotic notes, it's the actual mastermind behind this madness, hidden in a melody designed to hijack your brain. This isn't just a single release, this is a biological weapon, through melody. They're not trying to entertain you, they're trying to own your mind. The worm itself is an actual parasite, a creature that latches onto his head like a sci-fi leech. We see it wrapped around SpongeBob's brain, jamming to the beat. And it's not just messing with his thoughts, it's affecting his body. Look closely and you'll see one of his nerves has already turned blue. In the ocean, blue sea sponges are often poisonous, different from the yellow ones. My theory is that if SpongeBob was left untreated, he would slowly transform. Every nerve turns blue, his identity fades, and what's left? A walking jukebox. A living carrier for the song, shambling through Bikini Bottom, spreading musical doodle like a pandemic, and even then, the worm doesn't really die when it's forced out, it just searches for new prey, like to keep the cycle going. It's really an effective strategy to brainwash the whole city, which means this isn't just a personal attack. Maybe SpongeBob isn't the only victim here. There could be a lot of people having the same troubles. It's a citywide infection strategy, disguised as pop music. So yes, musical doodle might be brainwashing, but here's the thing about brainwashing, it doesn't just target your brain. It preys on something deeper, your wants. And that brings us to the second piece of the puzzle. Let's look at this from another angle. What if Earworm isn't just about brainwashing, it's about addiction? Not the chemical kind, but the kind we live with every day. The song SpongeBob hears, Musical Doodle, it's not deep or emotional. It's designed to be shallow, catchy and repetitive. It's a pop jingle, the kind you hear in an ad or a hit song with zero lyrics beyond a hook. And SpongeBob, he treats it like gospel. He buys the vinyl, loops it on repeat, he builds his whole night, his life, around it. Even as everything around him starts falling apart, he doesn't care because the song is fun. Sound familiar? It's the trap. And here's where the episode starts hitting a little too close to home. SpongeBob doesn't even question it. He doesn't evaluate it, he just needs more of it. You could replace Musical Doodle with literally anything. Bingeable shows, viral TikTok clips, sugary snacks, doom scrolling. Stuff that feels good, takes over our brain, and pulls us into a routine where we stop thinking. In that sense, Musical Doodle is a symbol of modern consumer obsession. A product we believe we want, even if it makes us worse off. Look again at Krusty Krab's kitchen during the spiral. It's messy. There's mustard graffiti everywhere, his walls are literally crumbling. The illusion of pleasure is so strong, but SpongeBob can't even see the destruction. And remember when Mr. Krabs threatens to fire him? SpongeBob just laughs it off. He laughs like none of it matters. Why? Because by then, the product has consumed the user. SpongeBob's no longer living his life, he's just playing the loop. He's a doodle puppet. So yeah, maybe the earworm isn't fully at fault here. It's something we invite in because we crave it. But once it gets in, once it loops long enough, it changes you. And that leads us to the final theory of the spiral. The one taking SpongeBob somewhere more dark. Something far more personal. This here's the one that really hits home. The psychological angle. what if the whole episode is a metaphor for intrusive thoughts? You know, those mental loops that won't go away, the ones you try to fight, but the harder you push back, the worse it gets? SpongeBob tries to resist at first, but eventually he breaks. Not because he wants to, but because he's exhausted, and here's where it gets weird. Maybe even symbolic in some part of the episode. SpongeBob never asks for help. Now, while SpongeBob isn't the brightest creature in Bikini Bottom, surely even he could recognize when something wasn't right. But in the episode, not once does he acknowledge that he needs help from his friends or family. That's how intrusive thoughts work. They don't show up like villains, they wear your face. And by the time you realize they've taken over, it feels too late to fight. His house and the Krusty Krab fall apart the more the song takes over. It visualizes the song's damage to his life, cluttered, broken, impossible to live in. Once you fall into this pit, you lose everything dear to you one by one. These symptoms sound familiar to you? It's because it's a sign of mental health issues. An addiction, obsessive behavior, even depression. So you remember that Krabs tries to physically pull the worm out, and Sandy said it won't work? Because it will damage his brain. It's kind of weird at first. SpongeBob definitely could take some brain damage, right? He has already done that so many times. It just felt like plot bridging so they could all sing their own personal favorites. But it actually symbolizes how brute force can't fix mental illness. When you're so deep in the pit, no amount of physical treatment will fully heal you. They subtly tell us that the only way to replace bad memories is by creating new ones, no matter how crap it is. Well, it's always better to replace it with better memories. You get the idea. Squidward's clarinet is awful, indeed, but it's the only thing that breaks the spell. This tells us that maybe discomfort is the cure. It's not a pretty cure that saves you, it's something raw, honest, kinda ugly. And after that, there's still some subtle details in the episode. When SpongeBob's finally free, there's a brief moment where he's completely drained, just empty. The thing that possessed him left a hole behind, or added a hole in this case. So, which theory is right? It's tempting to pick one explanation and stick with it. Brainwashing, consumerism, psychological breakdown, pick your poison. But the more I studied this episode, the more I realized none of these theories stand alone. Instead, they feel like layers of the same idea. A bigger picture of the episode is hiding in plain sight. And once you connect every single one of them, that's when you see what this episode is really about. It starts with a jingle. Musical Doodle is a parody of manufactured media, made to stick, not to matter. Catchy, shallow, addictive. And SpongeBob, he takes the bait completely. He buys the vinyl, loops the record, builds his entire night around it. Even as everything falls apart, because the loop feels good. And once you've accepted it, once it feels safe, that's when you stop noticing the changes. This is where the line between entertainment and control blurs. The song isn't just stuck in his head, it rewires him. SpongeBob's nervous system starts turning blue, a visual sign of total infection. His body becomes a playback device, and his thoughts no longer feel like his own. Just like modern-day doom scrolling, this isn't about what you like, it's about what you can't stop. The content becomes background noise, and then it becomes identity. Eventually, SpongeBob stops fighting. He accepts the voice in his head, accepts the decay around him, and in doing so, he becomes something else. Just a living vessel for the song. But there's still one question left. Why SpongeBob? Why did this happen to him, the most joyful, unbreakable, optimistic character in the show? Unless that's exactly why it happened to him. What if the real twist of this episode isn't how he broke, but what was he before he broke? Because there's one loop that's been playing far longer than Musical Doodle, the one we never even noticed. After everything we've seen, the decay, the breakdown, the silence after the music, it's clear this isn't just a story about a song, or even a parasite. It's about SpongeBob, and the version of him we all take for granted. Think about who SpongeBob is. SpongeBob is the most optimistic character in Bikini Bottom. He works a dead-end job, gets no respect, loses sleep, gets pushed around, and still, all smiles. But what if that smile is a cage? What if that version of him, the happy sponge, the perfect worker, the always cheerful performer, is just another loop? Another musical doodle. This episode isn't just showing us what happens when the loop gets too loud. It's showing us that maybe there's another loop already being played. SpongeBob only makes a scene now because he lost his previous loop. What if SpongeBob has always been infected? Not by this song, but by the need to be SpongeBob. He's caught in a cycle of pretending to be okay, of smiling through exhaustion or dancing while falling apart. The brainwashing? That's how it starts. The addiction? That's how it spreads. But the darkest part is when you forget who you were before the loop began. And most haunting of all, the lyrics are telling just that. SpongeBob thought he was safe inside that performance, but the reality is he was trapped. Not by the worm, not by the music, but by the expectation to always be SpongeBob. Look closely. SpongeBob isn't fighting the worm. He's fighting himself, or at least the version of himself he's afraid to let go of. And look at the final moments. SpongeBob collapses, drained, not cheering, not grateful. He doesn't look free, he looks empty. Because when your whole life becomes a loop, freedom doesn't feel like relief. It feels like a loss. That's why the cure is so uncomfortable. Squidward's awful clarinet breaks the spell not because it's music, but because it disrupts the illusion. It's not pleasing, but it's real. Earworm is one of the darkest SpongeBob episodes ever made, not because of monsters, but because it reminds us of something terrifying. You can lose yourself completely, and no one will notice. And if SpongeBob, the most optimistic character in the show, can fall into this kind of mental loop, what does it say about the rest of us? What does it say about the roles we perform, the habits we repeat, the thoughts we can't shake? In the end, Earworm is subtly creepy because it's realistic. So many of us have lived it, singing the life we don't like, stuck in a thought we can't escape, trying to smile while everything inside is screaming. And the real question isn't, why can't SpongeBob stop singing the musical doodle? The real question is, when did the music start playing in your head? So the next time you hear a song stuck in your head, stop and ask yourself, is it really just a song? Or is it something else? And once the music starts, who's really in control? There's one disturbing episode that's always stuck in my head. SpongeBob and Patrick skipping work to ride the Fishing Hooks Carnival and gets pulled in the process. It's pretty straightforward. But now that we're older, the episode feels different. Mr. Krabs shows up like a doomsday prophet. SpongeBob and Patrick just can't stop riding the hooks. And SpongeBob's punishment is harsh. Almost as if the episode's wanting to tell us something bigger. So I went back to rewatch it again, but what I found out is shocking, to say the least. And once you see what it really might be about, you'll never watch it the same way again. Immediately, the episode starts with a weird scene, above Bikini Bottom. 3 realistic fishing boats casting lines into the sea, with the French narrator saying,
"Fishermen have quite an effect on our undersea friends."
Then it cuts to the Krusty Krab, where things are perfectly normal, until Mr. Krabs slams through the doors in distress.
They're back, I tell you!
He's not subtle in saying it either. He yells about the hooks to everyone's face with a cracking voice, but nobody listens. They all look at him like he's just being dramatic, like old Krabs is finally losing it. Even Squidward ducks into a trash can to avoid the conversation. And this is the first thing that bothers me. The people might have seen this happen more than once before, like it's just a regular thing, so they've chosen to ignore it. SpongeBob, of course, is the only one who seems to take Mr. Krabs seriously. He asks what all the warning is about. Krabs gives him a very intense warning. That the hook is back, don't go near the hooks, don't even look at them too long. He says they dangle down and draw you close with their pleasing shapes and their beguiling colors, which is oddly specific. They even made a live demonstration, giving Scooter the most painful-looking wedgie just to make a point.
Then higher and higher!
And here's where the tone shifts a little. Krabs says something worse happens if you get hooked, that they'll cook you, eat you, or worse, put you in a gift shop. I remember that line quite vividly, to be honest. Because if you were like me, I watched this episode early in the 2000s, around the same time Finding Nemo came to theaters. Also, spoiler alert, the setup was quite the same. The old guy Merlin comes babbling to Nemo about don't go somewhere near those surface creatures. So yeah, I kinda get the horror behind the got kidnapped by strangers thing. But back to Bikini Bottom again, we cut to SpongeBob working the grill, carrying this warning in the back of his mind. Then Patrick shows up in the window, says the carnival's in town and they should go together. But SpongeBob can't go, he's working. So Patrick convinces him, says it's not leaving, it's just taking a break. And that one line sets the disturbing theme for the episode. They arrive at the carnival, but it's clearly not a regular one. It's a field full of dangling hooks, swaying in the water like they're waiting for something. And again, no one else is around. Except Patrick says there was a kid there earlier, and now he's gone. Just a pair of empty shoes on the ground. This is looking a bit dire for a kid's show. SpongeBob then realized this is the hook thing Mr. Krabs warned him about. But Patrick doesn't give a damn. He puts his ass on the hooks, plays with the cheese bait, and puts some more in his mouth.
Does this look dangerous?
This entire scene is fascinating because the danger is visual and clear. SpongeBob's scared, the hooks are literally grabbing things and pulling them up, but the mood keeps bouncing back to comedy. Even when Patrick gets yeeted upward by a hook, SpongeBob thinks he's gone for good. He runs around shouting for help in a full-on panic. But then, Patrick floats back down, laughing like it was just an attraction ride. Patrick says it's fine as long as you jump at the last second. That moment broke SpongeBob's resolve, because whatever fear Mr. Krabs gave him, Patrick just proved it otherwise. Or at least that's how it looks. So, SpongeBob gives in. He jumps on the hook and gives it a ride. And it's fun, it's exhilarating. Even the fishermen on the surface fight to reel them in, but the boys jump off just in time, giggling all the way down. Womp womp, Mr. Fisherman. But you know who's not having a fun time? Squidward. Back at the Krusty Krab, everything's falling apart without SpongeBob. The grill's a disaster, customers are rioting, and Squidward's getting mobbed. Mr. Krabs realizes SpongeBob is gone. He's also mad at the fact that SpongeBob took a break.
No one's taken a break at the Krusty Krab since the Chum Famine of '59.
He starts tracking SpongeBob with his nose and finds both of them playing with the hook. So Krabs slams into a rock trying to stop them. And when they float back down, Krabs doesn't hug them, he snaps. He tells them what really happens when you go up too far. Apparently the gift shop wasn't the worst fate either. He says, you end up vacuum-packed in a can of tuna, with nothing to look forward to but the smell of mayonnaise. Fortunately, both of them apologize. They promise to stop. They even recite a sailor's vow. Yo ho, near the hooks we'll never go. And if the episode ended there, it would just be a funny little cautionary tale. Sadly, it doesn't. Cut to the next day, SpongeBob says he's ready to prove himself. He wants to be loyal and trustworthy to Mr. Krabs. But then Patrick calls him over again. Same field, same hooks. SpongeBob actually resists now. Said that he made a promise. Again, Patrick doesn't care. Says that he had his fingers crossed and Krabs is a dummy. Even goes as far as pulling the choosing friends card. But SpongeBob holds his ground. He actually pushes the hook away, calls it a liar and a deceiver. My boy really learned a lesson. Just kidding. SpongeBob comes down laughing, thinks he's fine, until he turns around and realizes he's actually hooked. In the pants, too. So he panics. He runs to Mr. Krabs for help, but he doesn't come right out and say it. He tries to hide it. You know, play it casually, pretend it's not a big deal. But it doesn't last long. He finally confesses and shows that he's hooked.
It's in there pretty deep.
And what happens next is kind of surreal. Mr. Krabs says there's only one thing to do, to take his pants off in front of the girls. It's time for embarrassment, ain't it? Well, SpongeBob did remove his pants, but the hook is still there, because it's also hooked in his underwear. Now, with Pearl and all her friends watching, SpongeBob has to go all the way. Krabs also says it's fine if he couldn't. He's just gonna search for another fry cook and puts up a help wanted sign. But after one final pull from the hook, the underwear snapped. The sign launched SpongeBob back and smacks him into the window of the Krusty Krab, naked. The girls obviously made fun of him. But as one final twist from the episode, turns out it's Squidward who placed the hook all along. It's all a plan with Mr. Krabs to give SpongeBob a lesson. And the final shot is SpongeBob running home, crying, while everyone else is just fine. Or not really. A tuna can gets shipped off to Patrick's house, which contains Patrick in it. That's the end. There's a lot to process here. It's funny and weird, obviously, but watching this episode as a kid, I get the clear message not to play with fire, especially the stuff adults clearly told you not to do. It will only bring disaster. Even more, SpongeBob's character is well depicted as an innocent child, so that's clearly emphasizing the tone of this is a naughty kid who got punished kind of episode. But now that we're grown adults, this episode just feels different. Maybe it means more. Something much more dark and unhealthy, to be precise. What if this episode isn't really about the hooks? What if I told you this is a story about temptation, peer pressure, and about what happens when you fall into something you don't fully understand, disguised as a kid's cartoon? Most people already know the drug metaphor take. The hooks look fun, they're dangerous, Patrick's reckless, SpongeBob gets peer pressured, it all lines up. But if that's all we say, it's not really a solved video. So here's another theory I want you to know. Hooky is a snapshot of what SpongeBob used to be back in Season 1 when the writers were still brave enough to lean into darker, unsettling ideas before Nickelodeon started to smooth off the edges. And when you rewatch the episode with that in mind, there's certain details that stand out that most people miss. For example, the empty pair of shoes at the carnival. Patrick says there was a kid there earlier and now they're gone. It's just one quick shot, but the camera lingers on the shoes just long enough for it to register. That's horror movie language. That's the writer quietly saying, this is what happens when you're stupid enough not to learn from somebody else's mistake. Or look at Mr. Krabs' warnings. He doesn't just say, don't touch the hooks. He paints the whole picture, being dragged up, cooked, eaten, or worse, sold in a gift shop. Now, think about it for a second. Being commodified, turned into a product, or sealed in a tuna can with nothing to look forward to but mayonnaise isn't a joke. Oftentimes, someone who has a crippling addiction to drugs would have to lose everything they own and not rarely make themselves into a commodity with nothing to look forward to but mayonnaise. Now here's the part that really stuck with me. It's the fact that SpongeBob doesn't ask for help right away. He's ashamed to admit that he relapsed. He sneaks in, fidgets, tries to play it off like nothing happened. And when he finally admits it, he says, I'm hooked. I'm so ashamed. That line hit harder than I expected. Like they've let someone down, or worse, become something they're not proud of. Often thinking, how do I get here in the first place? They would also have to suffer being labeled, mocked, even disowned by the people closest to them. That's what makes it disturbing. It's really familiar. But at least he admitted it. He opens up to Krabs and asks for help even though he knows he'll get a good old scolding for that. Now, let's talk about the humiliation itself. SpongeBob gets naked in front of a bunch of girls and runs away crying. It's slapstick. But if we take the metaphor seriously, that scene is the writers showing us the shame cycle. When someone finally admits they've slipped, whether it's drugs, alcohol, gambling, anything like that, you lose privacy and dignity. You lose whatever version of yourself you were trying to protect. It's something you have to do in order to fully recognize the situation you're in, and more, to make a fresh start for the greater good. The way the show frames it, SpongeBob loses everything. Pants, underwear, confidence, and then he gets slammed against the glass like an exhibit. Everyone's calling him SpongeBob Nudie Pants. And Krabs just stands there and watches. He knew it was Squidward all along, but truth be told, I'm really glad it was Squidward holding the rod. Their idea of teaching SpongeBob a lesson was public humiliation, or a prank. Even though it still doesn't make any sense how Squidward has done it. How could he cast the line that looked like it came from the surface? It's just cartoon logic, I think, but that doesn't really matter. What matters is that Squidward is willing to pull a prank on him. Yes, you could say that Squidward is just mad because he got mobbed by the customers yesterday. It was SpongeBob's fault after all, so he wants to have revenge. But it also shows how much Squidward cares for SpongeBob. As much as he's annoyed by his loud neighbor, he doesn't want SpongeBob to end up in a tuna can. So he agreed to give SpongeBob a lesson, even though he kinda didn't want to admit it.
Well, that was more of SpongeBob than I needed to see.
This also means that Mr. Krabs set up the scene by intentionally inviting Pearl and her best friend to have a glass of water at the Krusty Krab so they could make fun of naked SpongeBob. Which is kinda messed up if I'm being honest. But hey, it all worked in the end. And then we get the final punchline, if you want to call it that. SpongeBob runs home humiliated. But Patrick? Patrick gets delivered in a can of tuna. Again, it's just Patrick being Patrick, but remember, SpongeBob got caught, confessed, humiliated, and learned something. Patrick didn't. He never stopped or learned anything. What's also crazy is that I'm pretty sure Patrick knew what happened to the kid. He knew that the kid got snatched to the surface and got sent to a gift shop. However, he also knew that once you end up in a tuna can, you will get sent back to your home, and all you need to do is open up the can.
Oh, does somebody have a can opener?
Patrick doesn't even seem bothered. I think it's not the first time for him. He knows no matter how deep his addiction gets, no real harm will happen. There's no such thing as going too far, right? Which is also something a true addict would say. They convince themselves there's no such thing as too far, that the consequences don't matter. No matter what happens, they'll be fine. So why stop? This could also explain why the rest of Bikini Bottom didn't take Krabs' warning seriously. They know the hook thingy is not something new, and the only thing they could snatch is some dumb kids like Patrick. No one in their right mind would fall for such a cheap trick, so why bother? Just let them be. Now, a lot of you would think, wow, you're going far with this theory. Sure it's not just you overthinking? The answer is no, I'm pretty convinced. Once you see the context, you'll understand why this theory carries weight. In fact, some of you older fans might remember something about this. This episode aired in 2001, right at the turn of a cultural moment. In the late 90s, the US was facing a huge problem with drugs, especially synthetics like ecstasy, marketed as feel-good drugs but leaving behind a trail of overdoses and deaths. By the early 2000s, things got worse. The first wave of the opioid crisis was beginning, and overdose deaths doubled in just a few years. These were the headlines everywhere, the fear and the taboo that parents and schools quietly talked about. And knowing Hillenburg, a teacher before he was a showrunner, you can see how this kind of story would make sense. Hillenburg wasn't just pulling random imagery out of nowhere, he was slipping in a commentary that every adult in 2000 would have understood. Kids would see slapstick, but parents would see the quiet echo of a national crisis. And here's where I think the writers slipped in something clever. Remember the very first line of the episode? The French narrator said, "Fishermen have quite an effect on our undersea friends." That's the writers tipping their hand. Think about it, these hooks aren't made in Bikini Bottom, they're not from this town. They're lowered in by outsiders, imported into a community that doesn't fully understand them, only to snatch away anyone dumb enough to bite, which is the way drugs were flooding into American cities at the time. So when the narrator casually says, "Fishermen have an effect," that's the writer winking at us, pointing out how dangerous forces slip into our lives from the outside, changing everyone's lives before anyone realizes. That's the code. The reason the episode feels so disturbing, so different in tone, is because it's SpongeBob's writers leaving behind a message for educating drugs disguised as silliness. Temptation looks fun, addiction makes it worse, and if you ignore the warnings, the hook will always catch you. That's kind of amazing, huh? Is Patrick Star a robot, like an actual robot? A machine that's made to look like our dear pink friend? And I know that sounds insane because it is. Then again, SpongeBob is also a show where a fire can be lit underwater, a squirrel lives inside a glass tree dome, and a single-celled organism builds a wife out of a CCTV. So the question is not, can a robot Patrick exist? I think that's totally normal for Bikini Bottom. The real question is, why would Patrick need to be a robot? Because if Patrick is really a robot, whether it's since day one, swapped somewhere in the show, or if it only happens sometimes, then Patrick does a pretty good job of hiding it. And if that's true, Patrick Star might be pulling off the greatest trick Bikini Bottom has ever seen. So the Patrick is a robot idea didn't come out of thin air, as you might all expect. It really blew up because Alex Bale framed it inside a bigger lens, the idea that Bikini Bottom might already be in the early stages of a robot takeover, or better known as the robot invasion conspiracy. And the conspiracy is, honestly, pretty seductive, because robots in Bikini Bottom aren't rare. They pop up as character copies, consumer products, security systems, theme park animatronics, and as invented gadgets from geniuses like Plankton and Sandy everywhere. Which is weird because Bikini Bottom is not exactly a sci-fi society. I mean, half the town is still prone to mass panic caused by mad snail disease and butterflies. That's where the robot invasion angle comes from. The idea is that Plankton has built so many robots over the years, and most of them fail. But instead of throwing them away as scrap metal, what if he recycles, redesigns them for various purposes, and then quietly spreads them across town? Since there are so many similarities between Plankton's inventions and these gadgets throughout the city, it makes us think Plankton could set these robots up everywhere in order to activate them one day for his grand world domination plan. And that paranoia gets extra fuel because SpongeBob keeps flashing the same nightmare in the distance. Future Bikini Bottom, chrome everywhere, citizens replaced, robots running the place. So once you become suspicious of this, the next scary thought is obvious. Is it just the gadgets that get replaced? What if some of the characters we're watching are robots too? And that's why Patrick gets dragged into this theory more than anyone, because no one in the cast is as wildly inconsistent as he is, especially up in the head. One episode, he can barely count to 5, and the next, he's dropping a comment that sounds like it came from a philosophy textbook. So now we're all raising our eyebrows. Maybe we're not always watching the same Patrick. Maybe sometimes it's it's Robot Patrick we're looking at. However, I just feel that something much bigger is going on here. I mean, if the Robot Patrick idea is real, then at least it should have a clear footprint somewhere, right? We need a specific, obvious moment so we can actually see the signs clearly. And no episode leaves a bigger footprint than the day Patrick's head comes off and gets replaced. Which brings us to the so-called smoking gun of this theory. In the episode Patrick Smartpants, Patrick falls off a cliff while hunting for jellyfish. SpongeBob would later find him at the bottom, but his head has come off. SpongeBob panics, finds the head not far from him, and sticks Patrick's head back on. But now Patrick becomes a totally different version of himself. He talks in clean mannerisms, debates people over some intelligent stuff, and is pretty much cold to anyone who isn't on the same wavelength as him. This episode itself plays around the smarts versus empathy trope. Patrick would later choose to be dumb again over losing his friends, but that's not really what's important here. The big reason people keep coming back to this one is because of what happens the moment Patrick's head gets reattached. We cut to inside Patrick's skull, and we're not looking at a normal brain. We're looking at gears that are dusty and covered in cobwebs, which indicates that Patrick's brain hasn't been properly running for a long time. Then at the end, when they remove the wrong brain, there's a shot where you can see an actual plug inside his head. So yeah, rewatching Patrick Smartpants in this context, it's not hard to call this episode suspicious, especially when this episode could be the first time we see Robot Patrick in action. But here's where the real investigation actually starts, because one episode could simply be a gag. A single robot shot could just be a coincidence. So does the show keep hinting at the same mechanical bits after this episode? The answer is yeah, it kinda does. Like in Sing a Song of Patrick. One day, Patrick is trying to find some inspiration to write a song, and then we can see that same inner mechanization playing inside his head.
Come on, you stupid brain! Work!
Which indicates that Patrick could be smart if he wanted to be. It's just that the machinery in his brain gets really cold because it rarely turns on, and takes some effort to get running. Then there's Rule of Dumb. In this episode, Patrick is spiraling down after a hard day of being a king. And in the middle of his conversation with SpongeBob, there are sparks and smoke coming out of his head. And mind you, this is not just an exaggerated visual of Patrick's dizziness. SpongeBob reacts to this as if he could see that the springs had popped out. So yeah, after Patrick Smartpants, whenever Patrick tries to force his brain into a higher gear, the show just keeps reaching for that same imagery. It's a mechanism that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. Now, is that enough to prove he's a robot? Nah, not yet. It could just be an exaggerated visual, right? But at least it gives us something better for our investigation. It gives us a trail. Because this whole brain mechanism could explain why Patrick often switches between smart and dumb in just a few seconds. One good example is from the episode Squidtastic Voyage, where in the middle of trying to survive in Squidward's stomach acid, Patrick suddenly comes up with a solution.
We could filter the CO2 through our ballast tanks, refire the engines, and ride the shockwave out of here.
Wow.
And then 2 seconds later, he's back to being Patrick. That could be the sign of Patrick's inner machinery running for just a few seconds before it switches back off. However, if you think that's mind-blowing, we haven't even got to the biggest part of this theory. There is one character who clearly knows something about this, because they react like they've seen the switch before. And unfortunately, at one point, he slips. If there's any problem including robots in Bikini Bottom, I think everyone's suspicion immediately goes to the same guy, Plankton. Like I said earlier, since we've seen how many random robots exist in day-to-day Bikini Bottom, some of them even resembling the kind of stuff he builds, it's not a crazy leap to ask, what if Patrick is just another of Plankton's gadgets? The chance feels even bigger when SpongeBob hands us this moment in SpongeBob's Big Birthday Blowout from season 12. In the middle of planning SpongeBob's birthday party, Patrick has one of those smart moments, which Plankton reacts to like this.
It's almost time for me to take SpongeBob on that tour so you guys can decorate his house!
I guess even a broken moron can be right once a day.
And I'm not gonna lie, that line does sound like a slip. Like Plankton actually witnessed his own machine acting up, because he recognized the behavior. So for a moment, it feels like we're about to solve this whole case. Plankton does something with Patrick, but fails for whatever reason. And then this episode is the one where he acknowledges Patrick is not a total liability. Boom, we go home. Except, I don't think that's the whole explanation. I feel like there's still one cog missing in the machine. Because, let me ask you something. If Plankton had the power to build a robot Patrick, why would he ever choose Patrick as his guy? I mean, sure, Patrick has ridiculous strength. If you could control that, that would be useful. But Patrick can't even control his own thoughts most of the time. Patrick would just forget the mission halfway through, eat some important stuff, then blame the mission failure on SpongeBob. You could argue Patrick is just a failed prototype, an early model that never worked quite right. But that already feels too speculative, and I can't find any proof to back it up. And if you go back to the so-called smoking gun, Patrick Smartpants, there's this one detail that messes up the Plankton story. As it turns out, SpongeBob accidentally used brain coral instead of Patrick's real head when he reattached it the first time. That's the source of Patrick's sudden leap in intelligence. Which is a huge difference because I don't think Plankton is out here manufacturing living brain coral. Besides, most of Plankton's inventions are made of pure metal and rarely resemble any living being. Now, a quick nerd footnote here, because this matters more than you think. Brain coral isn't random stuff made up for the plot. It's a real type of coral. It looks like a brain in real life, but it's not literally a brain. Corals don't have brains. What they do have is a simple nervous system. You could picture it as biological wiring. And Patrick is a starfish, an echinoderm, aka the animal group famous for regenerating their body parts. Plus, we've seen Bikini Bottom play fast and loose with brain swapping as a concept anyway. Episodes like Whirly Brains and The Nitwitting are basically built on that premise. So in SpongeBob World logic, the explanation for Patrick Smartpants could be something way more gross and honestly more plausible for the show. SpongeBob accidentally slaps living neural organisms onto a starfish who could modify his body, and Patrick's brain basically boots into a different mode after that. And that's why I'm not comfortable calling Smartpants Robot Patrick. We can't prove that. What we can prove, however, is that Patrick's body can be modified, and thus becomes a question of what else can be swapped in and out of Patrick, and why? Let me put it like this. If there is anything mechanical happening inside Patrick's body, it probably didn't come from some shadowy villain crawling through his window with a wrench. Patrick might be modifying his own body by himself like a cyborg. And yes, reading that sentence already feels like committing a crime. Patrick, a cyborg? Buddy, are we solving a theory or writing fanfiction? Yeah, I know it sounds like a huge leap at first, but newer seasons of SpongeBob actually drop something that changes the game. Because at some point, the show straight up gives Patrick something that should not be in his possession. A time machine. And no, not in Sandy's dome, not in Plankton's lab, it lies inside Patrick's parents' house. In the Patrick Star Show, Patrick's bedroom has this recurring device called the Time Closet. It's been used throughout many episodes in the Star Show for different purposes, but mainly by Grandpat just to cause problems. And here in Season 2, there's an episode that might just be the answer to our investigation. Too many Patricks. So to put it simply, because if you haven't watched the Star Show, this sounds like nonsense, Patrick somehow becomes some kind of children's party celebrity, because that's his new gig apparently. They even had these ads playing on TV. And he gets overbooked. Too many birthday parties, same day, different places, classic problem for normal adults, horrifying problem for Patrick. See that disclaimer in the corner? Turns out Squidina's solution, Patrick's new sister by the way, to this attending lots of parties at the same time problem is by bringing in more Patricks from different timelines. There's Pat the Hapless from medieval times, there's Cave Patrick, which I think is the same as Patar from and the big one for our theory, Patron, a future robot Patrick. There you go. The show said it right out loud for us. More than one Patrick can exist at the same time, and they can even fill in for each other. But I can already hear the comments. Yeah, but that's the Patrick Star Show, that doesn't count. Well, the main show does drag that concept back into the mothership. In Season 16, there's a special episode called SpongeBob and Patrick's Timeline Twist-Up, which I also made a video about some time ago. And the premise hinges on Patrick's time closet going on the fritz and messing with the history of classic SpongeBob plots. So now, whether people like the Patrick Star Show or not, the franchise has officially done the handshake. So it's a rule that carries over to mainline SpongeBob. Which means the idea of Patrick being replaced sometimes doesn't even need Plankton anymore. Patrick has his own doorway that can casually pull in other Patricks. One Patrick handles whatever's happening on Conch Street, another Patrick is off doing whatever Patrick does, and the Patrick we're watching might just be the one who showed up today. Now this is the part where your brain tries to save itself. Okay, but Patrick can't build that, right? He's still Patrick. Well, unfortunately, he kinda did. We can see that clearly in the Patterfly effect. In that episode, the time closet stops working for some reason, and Squidina basically laughs at him and says, rebuilding real time travel would take decades of research and education. It's almost impossible. So, what does Patrick do? He goes to the Bikini Bottom Institute of Technology to get the education. He spends years studying, graduates, basically becomes Einstein, and he ends up successfully reinventing the time closet. That is the moment we lose the right to say Patrick could never. Apparently he can. He just doesn't unless reality forces him to. Which ties directly back to what we've been tracking since the beginning. Patrick doesn't get smart gradually. He spikes into competence under pressure and then drops back down once he doesn't need it anymore. So now we've got a modern canon upgrade that changes everything. Patrick has access to multiple Patricks via the time closet, and he's proven he can maintain the system when he needs to. But that's still not the creepiest part in this story, because did I mention earlier that Patrick could be a cyborg, right? Yeah, that does happen in this corner of the franchise too. In the same episode, the whole plot kicks off because Patrick wants his mother to become a race car. No, not become a racer, a race car.
My mother is going to be a race car!
So he goes back in time and starts to train a younger version of his mom to be a race car. He feeds her a car engine, makes her drink a whole barrel of oil, and lets her modify her own body to become a car.
We did it!
Even if you treat it as cartoon gross-out logic, it's pretty clear. The whole Starfish family can modify their own bodies as they please, and go back in time to change whatever they want. That's pretty common in the Star Show. So, is the Patrick Star robot theory true? Well, the answer is yes, but not in the simple plankton-made sleeper agent way like we all thought it was. The real answer is messier and, honestly, more like SpongeBob. Patrick is a character who can be swapped, duplicated, and patched together through backups, body mod logic, and literal timeline nonsense because the Starfish family is just modular, both their body and their existence. I guess this whole theory should be named Patrick Star Modular Theory, now that I think about it. For years, people have asked the same question. How in the world does a crab have a whale for a daughter? And depending on who you ask, the answer could vary. Some say crabs killed Pearl's mom and turned her into Krabby Patty meat. Others say her real dad is locked away in prison. And then there's the idea that Pearl isn't his daughter at all, she's just adopted. But let me tell you, you're missing the real story. Because the actual answer isn't some crazy conspiracies, it's something much more grounded and tragic. Because once you see the clues, you'll realize the truth has been hiding in plain sight this whole time. Now, Pearl's real mom is the biggest unsolved mystery in SpongeBob. She's never been seen, never been named, and yet her shadow lingers over almost every episode she's connected to. But what do we actually know about Pearl's mom? First off, we know exactly why Pearl is a whale. Hillenburg directly answered the very question. He said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that he wanted each main character in SpongeBob to be a different kind of sea creature. Sponge, starfish, squid, squirrel, crab, whale. It was a deliberate choice for diversity in the cast. There's also another confirmation that we get about Pearl's mom, but not in the show. In the SpongeBob trivia book, an early staff writer David Fain wrote, "She's a whale, you see? Takes after her mother that way." Now, most fans would just assume that line is referring to the fact that Pearl resembles her mother physically, which is a whale too. But I think this line also indicates the fact that Pearl resembles her mother as someone who loves to spend money on luxury and is basically expensive to maintain. More on that later. Now here's where it gets interesting. We do know Mr. Krabs fought in a war. In the Krusty Krab training video, the narrator flat out says,
"After the war, Krabs stayed secluded in a deep depression."
That detail has fueled the fan theories about Krabs being a killer or a cannibal. That somewhere around the war, he had the experience of killing a whale. But think about it another way. Anyone who knows veterans or has family who served understands one thing. Coming back from war isn't simple. You don't just flip a switch and go back to normal life. The scars stick with you. The silence after the battle could feel heavier than the fight itself, and a lot of vets spend years, even decades, trying to recover. So imagine Krabs fresh out of the Navy, alone, depressed, and penniless. What would it take to pull him out of that spiral? Because I don't think opening Krusty Krab alone is enough. It had to be something deeper, enough to make him believe in life again. That's where Pearl's mother comes in. And here's the smoking gun. According to creative director Vincent Waller, Hillenburg confirmed that they had a whole episode planned to finally introduce Mrs. Krabs. This is planned to air sometime in the Golden Seasons. It was going to be a two-parter explaining her backstory and Pearl's origins, but they chose to shelve it because Hillenburg believed the Pearl mysteries were sometimes better left unanswered. He wanted Pearl's mom to stay an enigma until he found the right moment to reveal her properly. Sadly, he passed away before that could ever happen, so we may never know the plot. But let me ask you this question. Knowing Hillenburg and the golden 3 seasons of SpongeBob, do you really think his big reveal was going to be Pearl's mom got harpooned in war, or her parents are in jail so Krabs decided to give her a better life? Come on. If anything, it would have been something tragic, but grounded. We actually have more breadcrumbs to work with. For one, Krabs' house is full of Navy memorabilia, and we've met several old pals from his service days. That already sets the stage for who Krabs really is, a veteran with a past he doesn't talk about. But look closer inside his home. Along with the Navy stuff, we see pictures of whales hanging on the walls. Like here, and here too. Now, these aren't pictures of Pearl, they're way too big. These are whales the size of ships. So who were they? Fans usually ignore these details, but to me, it feels like a quiet nod. A symbol that Krabs had an important whale in his life, one that really meant something to him. But not in that kind of bloodthirst or revenge kind of obsession. It was more of a kind of lust obsession. Yes, Eugene Krabs is falling in love with a sperm whale. Now you might be thinking, why would a crustacean fall in love with the largest mammal in the sea? That just doesn't make sense. The only 2 relationships we ever see him have are with Mrs. Puff, a pufferfish, and Pearl's mother, a whale. You see what I'm getting at here? In both cases, Krabs goes for women who are larger than him. Let's just put it that way. Krabs doesn't fall for someone modest. He falls for personalities that overwhelm him. And that's exactly what he needed after the war, someone big enough to pull him out of the darkness. So here's how I imagine it went. After the war, Krabs is broken, as many vets are. Until he meets Pearl's mom. She's vibrant, spoiled, loves to spend money, everything Krabs isn't. But against all odds, they click. He falls hard for her. It gives him a reason to move forward, to start the Krusty Krab and to build a future. It also makes more sense if Krabs opens up Krusty Krab as his way to get his wealth, because again, Pearl's mother is not cheap to get. Suddenly, the training video line makes perfect sense. The line, after the war, Krabs fell into a depression until he bought a restaurant. It was about rebuilding his life with her by his side. Sadly, Pearl's mom doesn't stay long. We don't know exactly if she died, maybe illness, maybe accident, or if she simply walked out because Krabs was too cheap and couldn't provide the life she wanted. And here's the thing, we actually have evidence pointing to that second option. See, the answer lies in the Krusty Krab journey. If we take into account that Krabs was born in 1942, like in his driver's license, and that he fought in the war when he's young, it means he served in the Navy somewhere around the 1960s to 1970s. Gee, I wonder what war he fought in. This means that he met Pearl's mother early in the 70s, right around the time Krabs opens Krusty Krab and hires both Squidward and Jim, the original fry cook. Jim obviously did some ethereal works, giving Krabs enough money to afford such a class in the early days of Krusty Krab. But Jim didn't last long because Krab refused to give him a raise, so he quit only a few years later. Now, we don't get to see much of Krusty Krab in the 80s and 90s. SpongeBob himself was born in 1986 and only joined in 1999. But assuming it was only Krabs and Squidward running the business at the time, I would bet that business wasn't good. So Krabs had to spend his savings just to run Krusty Krab on cheap maintenance, as we see in the episode Help Wanted. This financial difficulty is severely affecting Krabs' relationship with his wife. Just imagine. Pearl's still a baby, the restaurant isn't making money, and his wife, spoiled, expensive, bratty, can't accept that. So she leaves. And yes, this proves something most fans like to deny. Pearl is Mr. Crab's biological daughter. How does that even work? A crab and a whale? Well, it doesn't, not in real biology. But in cartoon logic, of course it does. You're not supposed to pull out Punnett squares in a cartoon. You're supposed to accept the emotional truth. Pearl is Crab's daughter. And actually, Pearl being Crab's biological daughter makes the story stronger, because if Pearl were adopted, the whole guilt angle collapses. Spoiling her wouldn't make sense, and if she is the last piece of the woman he lost, then spoiling Pearl is about her mother. Every birthday party, every dollar wasted, every broken wallet is him trying to hold on to a woman who's long gone. Furthermore, if we want to be more pragmatic with the story, why does Mr. Krabs not bother to change the Krusty Krab sign? The one that is shaped like a clamshell? Well, you could say he's just saving money, but I think that sign is his tribute to Pearl, because as we all know, pearls come from clams. It's his way to remember the life he tried to build and the one person he refuses to let slip away. Now here's where the details get even weirder. If you've watched SpongeBob long enough, you know Mr. Krabs has an obsession with clams. There's a whole episode dedicated to it. In Clams, Krabs literally hunts a giant clam after losing his millionth dollar. The entire story is a direct parody of Jaws, a man versus nature revenge plot. But here's the thing, why clams? Why not sharks or eels or any other sea predator? Because clams are directly tied to Pearl. Pearls come from clams, and Krabs surrounds himself with them. His restaurant sign is literally a clamshell. His curses are all clam-related. Even his most famous outburst is Mother of Pearl!
Mother of Pearl!
It sounds like him invoking Pearl's mother every single time something shocks him. Like a man who lost the love of his life and can't stop muttering her name in moments of stress. Now, back to the story. That means Krabs divorced around the late 80s, right after Pearl was born. That one tragic moment alone explains everything about Krabs' character. Why would the cheapest man in Bikini Bottom, the guy who refuses frying oil, steals pennies, and sells SpongeBob for 62 cents, be willing to spend thousands on Pearl's birthday? Why would he let her wreck the Krusty Krab in bossy boots? Why would he allow her to drain his wallet on shopping sprees? Because by spoiling Pearl, Krabs manages to fulfill what he couldn't to her mother. It's the only way to keep from losing everything all over again. This tragedy also explains why Krabs tried to date Mrs. Puff by showering her with money to show his affection and Krusty love. In Krabs' eyes, spending money is the only way he knew to show his love. Fans want to believe Krabs is a murderer or a villain or a monster, but the truth is, Krabs is just a father carrying the weight of war, heartbreak, and grief. He lives haunted by a woman we never met. His house is covered in whale pictures. His curses call her name. And his daughter is both his greatest joy and his deepest reminder of the love he couldn't keep. And honestly, it's such a sad story. At the end of the day, all these theories about Pearl, cannibalism, jail dads, sugar daddy, they're fascinating. They make for great creepypastas, but the truth is much more heartbreaking. Hillenburg wasn't building SpongeBob around serial killers or prison dramas. He was building a cartoon that could be weird, funny, and sometimes unexpectedly heartfelt. And when you put the real clues together, the story we get is much simpler. She's just a girl who takes after her mom. And her mom was probably a larger-than-life whale who either passed away too young or left Krabs because he was broke. Which leaves Krabs as a single father trying to raise a daughter who reminds him of everything he lost. So while we fans keep chasing conspiracies, the reality is already a tragedy. And maybe that's why Hillenburg shelved the episode. This mystery would hurt much more than the "Have you seen this snail?" episode. SpongeBob had a unique identity, a show that can go from lighthearted and hilarious to completely off the wall, surreal in the blink of an eye. And there's one episode in particular that has been misunderstood for over a decade. This is Spongehenge, an episode so ambiguously creepy that fans skip it while watching. But what if Spongehenge is more than just another creepy outlier? What if, buried underneath the weird visuals and unsettling tone, there's actually something deeply meaningful going on? Something intentional, something beautiful even. I've rewatched this episode more times than I'd like to admit. I went through every season looking for patterns, callbacks, and context, and I finally solved the mystery of SpongeBob's weirdest episode. Not only did it change my views on the episode, it changed my vision about the legacy of SpongeBob as a character, and as a show. But before we dive into what Spongehenge actually means, first we need to break down what actually happens in the episode. It all starts with something simple: wind. The episode opens with Bikini Bottom getting hit by an unusually strong gust. Two fish leave a diner with takeout, talking about how rough the weather is. Oh no, Neptune must be mad at something. Nah, it's Poseidon. Everyone knows he's the real ruler of the sea. It's a dumb background joke, but it's the seed. Because the wind gets worse. The wind snatches their food, yeets it across the city, and smacks SpongeBob right in the face while he's sleeping. SpongeBob wakes up, noticing that it was a goulash, and comes up to the windows hoping to find the owner. But then it happens. A gust hits him, blows through his holes, and makes this strange, hollow, haunting sound. This is the first sign that something's off. Longtime fans know this isn't normal SpongeBob sound design. The show rarely, if ever, uses tones like this. It sounds similar to an ocarina, maybe even a flute. Definitely not Hawaiian ukulele background music. It's eerie. It lingers. But the jellyfish? They love it. They're vibing. They swarm to SpongeBob like he's a walking Spotify playlist. Dancing, twirling, even floating inside him like it's a jellyfish mosh pit. Even when the morning came, it only attracted more jellyfish towards SpongeBob. They block him from going anywhere, literally trap him with good vibes. Eventually, Krabs helps him to get on Krusty Krab by dragging him with a fish hook, but he doesn't stay long. The jellyfish return, the wind gets worse, and the Krusty Krab? Gone, launched into the air like it owed someone money. SpongeBob crash lands at Patrick's house. Patrick, being a real friend, lets him in for about 5 seconds, until he gets stung and blames SpongeBob for being a negative influence. Okay, thanks, bro. So SpongeBob runs into a cave. Deep, remote, windless, silent. Just him and lots of rock. And here's where it gets dark. SpongeBob doesn't just hide, he unravels. He starts talking to rocks, laughing to himself, growing this wild, scruffy wizard beard like he's been in there way too long. Then he builds a statue, a stone replica of himself, not for decoration, just to talk to have tea with. When the wind hits the statue, it makes the same sound. The jellyfish return, they hear it, and SpongeBob gets an idea. He starts building, not one, but dozens of massive stone versions of himself placed in a circle, each one tuned to catch the wind just right. It's basically Spongehenge, now in surround sound. He's no longer trying to escape the problem, he's trying to control it, perfect it, recreate the sound, make it permanent. And it works. The jellyfish finally stop swarming him, the music is enough. And for the first time in who knows how long, SpongeBob is free. So he returns to Bikini Bottom, expecting home. But instead, nothing. Everything is gone. The world moved on without him, and he's left by himself. He gave everything, his time, his sanity, his identity, to create something he thought mattered, something perfect. But when he came back, there was nothing left to come back to. Skipping forward 3,000 years, the aliens are here, staring at the Stonehenge, trying to figure out who built them and why. And that's the end of the episode. No jokes, no payoff. Just an eerie wind and maniacal laughs. That is an ambiguous ending, and pretty dark, I think. This is also not a regular ending for SpongeBob episodes. Normally, the episode would follow a 3-act structure with resolution at the end. But this episode had no resolution whatsoever, only that eerie laugh. Spongehenge ends with no answers and 1,000 questions. How long was SpongeBob in the cave? Why is it still windy after 3,000 years? What happened to all the Bikini Bottomites? The ending gives you nothing. No punchline, no visual clues, just silence. And for a lot of viewers, that was the problem. Some fans hated it for the ambiguity. Others said it didn't even feel like a SpongeBob episode. From the opening scene, the tone is off. No goofy humor, no ukulele strumming in the background, just this. It's eerie, unfamiliar, and that's intentional. On the surface, this episode is just SpongeBob dealing with jellyfish trouble. But dig a little deeper, and it starts feeling like a metaphor for obsession, isolation, maybe even madness. SpongeBob doesn't solve a problem, he gets consumed by it. He spends who knows how long building stone versions of himself just to keep the music going, perfecting the way they sing in the wind. And when he finally returns home, everyone's gone. The Krusty Krab is a ruin, Bikini Bottom is empty. All he has left are the jellyfish, still dancing to a sound that isn't even coming from him anymore. He became a monument to his own art, a ghost conducting music for no one.
When Spongehenge first aired, no one knew what to make of it. Some fans called it brilliant, others thought it was creepy, dark, even depressing. A lot of people just wrote it off as random nonsense. But the older you get, the harder it is to shake off. You start to ask yourself,
what was this episode really trying to say? Spongehenge leaves a gap just wide enough for interpretation. Since this episode was aired, a lot of people have already constructed a lot of good theories. And by using every single one of those theories, I was finally able to solve the true meaning behind the episode. The first theory is that the whole episode is a joke about ancient monuments. The title is an obvious reference to Stonehenge, the mysterious monument that's inspired centuries of speculation. Historians write books about it. Tourists take selfies in front of it. No one really knows what it means, so we project meaning onto it. Spongehenge is just that, a long joke about meaningless monuments. SpongeBob builds giant stone versions of himself. 3,000 years later, aliens find them and wonder what they meant. A gag about how we treat the unknowable is sacred. And yeah, that could be it. But if it's a joke, where's the punchline? The episode doesn't end with a satisfying laugh. It ends with a laugh that feels wrong. That's the first red flag. This episode starts like a joke and ends like a warning. Now, let's go one layer deeper. Some fans believe this wasn't just about jellyfish or monuments. It was about the people behind the show. Spongehenge was episode 99B, the end of season 5, right before the show's tone and quality took a sharp dive. Most of the original creative team, including Steven Hillenburg, had already stepped away by then. So what if this was their last hurrah? The true ending of SpongeBob? A final, weird, beautiful, unfiltered piece of storytelling before the studio took full control. In that context, the silence makes more sense. The weird tone, the somber pacing, the lack of resolution. It's not a glitch, it's intentional. It's the sound of the creators letting go. Then again, as we all know, the shows didn't stop there. It keeps going with season 6. But what if this episode wasn't just about SpongeBob or art? What if it was about faith? Because there's one more theory, one that feels spiritual, almost biblical. It starts with a throwaway line early in the episode. Two background fish argue. Neptune must be mad. No, it's Poseidon. Everyone knows that. They laugh and move on. But if you're paying attention, that line is the key to everything. Because if the storm isn't natural, if the wind isn't random, then someone, or something, sent it. An eternal storm, jellyfish hypnotized, a town emptied. This isn't just weather, it's judgment, or even worse, abandonment. It's damnation sent by the gods themselves for the people of Bikini Bottom, because they're forgetting who their supreme ruler is. But which gods? Technically, both Neptune and Poseidon are sea gods. Neptune's from Roman mythology, Poseidon's Greek. And the show has played with both, sort of. But since the very beginning of the show, we have never heard Poseidon's name mentioned up until this episode. Sure, he was later making appearances in the movie Sponge on the Run, but that movie is so isolated from the main series and practically has no ties with Bikini Bottom. Even there, he's not some all-powerful being. He's obsessed with skincare and bath bombs. Not worthy of a god, in my opinion. Meanwhile, Neptune, as you all know, is the king of the seas, living in the royal city Atlantis. Neptune is also 5,000 years old, as we all see later in the Battle of the Triton, so he's not really aging. Indeed, he also possesses a power worthy of a god, capable of making miracles simply by pointing his finger at something. So if anyone's capable of creating a storm, it's him. But there's also a problem with that theory. There is no story or lore suggesting that Neptune was mad at the people of Bikini Bottom in the slightest. Then again, if he truly wanted worship, wouldn't he just show up and demand it? Instead, the wind comes, and it never stops. Even 3,000 years later, the storm is still howling, long after SpongeBob, the jellyfish, and everyone else is gone. The only reason I could think of was that this was just two gods having a quarrel with one another, just like Greek gods would do. Their fights often led to suffering for their own people. But that's kind of dragging it too far. The show doesn't even lean into Greek mythology that much. Aside from using characters like Neptune and Atlantis, they never really mention anything else. Which leads to one more terrifying question. If Neptune's not responsible, and Poseidon doesn't care, then who or what is this? But beyond myth, and beyond farewell letters, there's a much more personal reading. This could be a depiction of SpongeBob's descent into artistic obsession. The way he treats the statues, how precise he is, how he talks to them, has tea with them, it's not only tragic, it's also unsettling. He's not building out of joy, he's building because he has to. This isn't passion, it's compulsion. And it's not the first time SpongeBob's done this. There's a blueprint for this breakdown hidden in an older episode, The Sponge Who Could Fly. In that episode, SpongeBob dreams of joining the jellyfish in the sky. He spends the whole episode trying, failing, being humiliated, until he finally succeeds. And the town? They hate him for it. They mock him, they turn on him, they only like him again when he crashes and gives up. And then comes the line, a single sentence that hits way harder in hindsight. They hated me when I was trying, but they loved me when I failed. That is also Spongehenge, an artist who dares to do something different and gets exiled for it. So he hides and creates, alone, not for applause, for meaning. And when he returns, the world has moved on. That's the real horror of Spongehenge, not the wind, not the jellyfish, but the idea that SpongeBob gave everything to his art and it didn't save him. It just replaced him. You see, after analyzing all those theories, maybe none of the theories are technically correct, but that's kind of the point. Spongehenge was a phenomenon because it didn't explain enough. It leaves just enough space for you to stare into the void and project whatever you want. Artistic madness, religious symbolism, mid-2000s existential dread, pick your poison. But if you still watch modern SpongeBob to this day, suddenly it clicks. What if these theories aren't competing ideas, but steps in a larger story? The joke that never lands, the goodbye disguised as nonsense, the godless world where no one is listening, the obsession with art. They all build toward one final idea, the one that ties it all together. That Spongehenge isn't trying to explain the lore behind, it's a prophecy to the future. One cryptic love letter from a land beyond the grave. The last gasp of the original team before they vanished into the corporate wind tunnel. After the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, which creator Stephen Hillenburg always intended to be the grand finale, most of the original crew dipped, Hillenburg included. He didn't want SpongeBob to become just another endless franchise. He wanted it to end while it still meant something. But the fans, us, we couldn't let it go. He became a global icon, a marketing tool, a Halloween costume, a meme generator. We don't want SpongeBob to die. We kept demanding more, and so the network obliged. They kept SpongeBob alive. But was it really alive? Or was it just a replica? A hollow version of what it used to be? Sounds familiar? That's Spongehenge. It's not just a weird episode, it's a prophecy. A parody of what SpongeBob would become after the original creator is no longer with us. And the wind? Loud, chaotic, never-ending? Is fame. It comes out of nowhere. It makes music, it draws a crowd, and once it starts, you can't make it stop. It turns you into something else, something people want you to be. Suddenly, SpongeBob isn't SpongeBob anymore, he's a mascot. His friends turn on him, not because they hate him, because they don't recognize him. So he runs, he hides, and alone in a cave, he sculpts. Not to be loved, just to be remembered. Like an artist pouring everything into a final piece no one asked for. A long and painful process to make a legacy worth being remembered. And the statues? They're not tributes, they're warnings to us, the fans. That one day, you'll be cheering for something bigger, louder, and not the real ones. The statues don't complain, they don't change, they just stand there and look like SpongeBob, just like the modern episodes. More episodes came, more SpongeBobs, but they weren't him. They were replicas, polished, heartless, made from stone. No feelings, no weirdness, just content. And in that final shot, SpongeBob stands in front of it all, a man out of time, replaced by statues, performing to a crowd that isn't listening. And maybe this episode is saying, one day, far into the future, there will still be a SpongeBob. But it won't feel like SpongeBob. It will be something that tries to look like him, tries to sound like him, but the soul is gone. And some future kid will look at the screen and ask, what is this? What is this supposed to be? How did it even get here in the first place? But hey, at least the stone was entertaining to the aliens. So maybe Spongehenge wasn't nonsense after all. Maybe it was the original team's final message, a whisper buried in the wind, a warning about fame, a goodbye to the fans, and a time capsule for what the show used to be before it got lost in its own echo. And the sad part is, we're the ones who changed him.
But get this, if this is a parallel civilization with its own economy and property and class structure, what does that mean about the stuff in it? What does it cost to live in a place like Bikini Bottom? What does a pineapple under the sea actually go for on the open market? If you haven't seen it yet, I did a whole breakdown on exactly that. the real-world value of SpongeBob's house, what a fry cook's salary can actually afford in this economy, the whole thing. I'd recommend it as a follow-up to this one, because honestly, a lot of what we just covered makes that video hit different. I'll leave it on screen. Go check it out when you're done here.